I want a divorce. Evelyn's voice was trembling with rage and pain as she said the words. Her eyes were filled with tears and her face flushed with anger as she peered into one of the most enchanting turquoise eyes she had ever seen, an eye she had always loved to stare into. Surprisingly, he gazed back at her, his hands tucked inside his pocket as he stared at her indifferently, as if he wasn't moved a bit by her words. She watched as his once void face that held no emotions smiled with triumph written boldly in his face. Wait, did he just smile at her words? Evelyn pondered, curling her fist into a ball as she folded her hands together across her chest. He must think she was joking. Retracting her step, she searched her wardrobe, her hands running through the furniture, knowing, truthfully, that it might be her last time here. Ebonywoodville was a big mansion she wouldn't ever dream of leaving for a second. From the exterior decor to the interior decor, it screamed money. Evelyn let out a sigh of relief as her hands finally met with a brown piece of envelope. Turning her back, she presented it to her husband, who, with his hands still tucked in his pocket and leaning close to the wall, his shirt buttons undone, giving him this hot model look, gave her a void look. Here, she uttered, stretching out the divorce paper she had finalized with her lawyer at the last minute. And what on earth do you think you're doing? Caleb's voice came out indifferent, as if he didn't give a damn about her. Divorcing you. I just need your stupid signature on that paper, and we are done for good. Evelyn almost yelled out. You'll sign mine instead. His voice came out cold, void of emotions, betraying nothing of the turmoil that was roiling inside him. Evelyn's brow quirked as she peered into his eyes, searching for the truth. His eyes were cold and empty, not even an ounce of emotion left. You don't mean this, do you? Evelyn stuttered, her voice breaking with each word she uttered. Come off it, Evelyn. We both know I've never loved you for once throughout our marriage. We had both lived in lies, and I had only agreed to get married to you because you manipulated my family into getting married to you, or I lose the Winthrop fortune. You made my father threaten to disown me if I don't get married to you, and now we are married, aren't we? The Winthrop belongs to me, doesn't it? So we are done. Evelyn had never thought a day like this would come. She watched as those long legs took steady steps towards where she stood, his hands tilting her jaw as his eyes peered into her. The once enchanting turquoise eyes turned into a glint of mockery, reminding her that he had used her as bait to claim their family inheritance. The once hands that had always caressed her gently now held her jaw roughly as he stared at her with anger filled in his eyes. It's Aurelia, isn't it? Evelyn muttered the bitter truth. It took her all odds not to say that, but the truth needed to be said. She knew Caleb right from childhood. She grew up with him, loving every aspect of him. Each year only increased her love for him, and she was hoping he'd be able to stare at her the way she does. She wished he would reciprocate her love for him. But just under a year's difference of him getting to know Aurelia, she had seen the change. The way he stared at Aurelia was quite different from the way he looked at her. And just under a year, he had already rented an apartment for Aurelia and secretly goes to meet her on several occasions. This was a discreet research she had carried out on him. She had thought he would be shocked for her to discover such a secret about him, but he wasn't so surprised about her discovery. And what about her? You didn't think I was screwing only you, do you? His response set the demon in her flying. FVCKU. She screamed out, her chest raging with anger. She had thought he was going to deny her accusations and act naive, but there he was accepting the fact that he was cheating on her with his full chest. 1 minute she was screaming, the next, she felt her hands flying as she delivered a thunderous slap to his face. Silence. Evelyn retraced her step, pangs of guilt rushing through her head. She was quite ashamed of how she couldn't place her anger in check. I'm sorry, she muttered slowly, her long lashes batting together as she avoided the hot scrutiny of his gaze. She could tell that his eyes were shooting daggers, and that was the least she needed for herself right now. You've grown quite feisty. This isn't the woman I got married to. I'm just so hurt about the fact that Evelyn's voice faltered, regret washing through her. Throughout her 5 years with him, she hadn't for once raised her hands on him. You should have thought twice before poking your head into my business. That shows your lack of trust in me. Isn't that breaching our agreement as a wedded couple? His tone of accusations made her guilt deepen. And cheating on me isn't a breach. Can you hear yourself? Evelyn felt she was going to have a migraine after this long argument, which was leading to nowhere. You want a divorce, don't you? Here it is, so sign mine, and we are done just like you want. Pushing the files into her hands, he started buttoning his shirt. Evelyn's hands trembled as she opened the white paper. She felt tears threatening to flow down her cheeks as she stared at his signed signature. The only space left was hers alone. That simply implies that he had it prepared for her for days if not weeks. How long did you have this with you? Her voice trembled as she spoke. It doesn't matter, does it? Yeah, you're right, it doesn't. Evelyn muttered back in pain. You have just 5 days to sign this. With that, he headed for the door. And where are you going to? Of course, to screw my mistress, Aurelia. His response made her heart shatter. Staring at the divorce paper in her hands, Evelyn sank down to the bed as she wept. She could hardly believe that her 5-year marriage was going to be over after she put her signature on that paper. Her eyes scanned through the contract term agreement. She was going to be compensated with 30% of the Winthrops in order to set him free. Her mind wandered back to 5 years ago when she heard the news of the arranged marriage to Caleb. She could say she was the most excited girl in their town. Who wouldn't be excited at such news of getting married to someone you have had a die-hard crush on for almost 20 years of your life? That was more like a big dream come true, though she knew that Caleb was never pleased about their wedding, and she had heard rumors several times that he was in love with another lady. At that moment, Evelyn didn't care about anyone, she just wanted Caleb for herself and was hoping he was going to warm up to her. She fully believed that it was just a matter of time, and Caleb was going to get used to her and see her the way she saw him. But she was wrong. Over the years, she tried her best in every aspect to fill every part of his life, sacrificing her dreams of becoming a surgeon and settling for being a full-time housewife. She ensured his breakfast, lunch, and dinner were fully prepared by her without missing his favorites. She helped him with work from the office, ironed his clothes, and performed every duty of a wife to him. She could tell that he was getting fond of her, but he never once expressed his love for her. Instead, he always expressed his gratitude through passionate moments, making her climb through several heights with him and fulfilling her every sexual desire. Their sensual nights of conversation about how his work went, accompanied by an oily massage from him, and then a blissful moment of him sliding in and out of her, gave her assurance that he was going to fall for her, as he was so addicted to her body that a day nearly passed without him confessing that. But then, threats stepped in when she started receiving texts about him having a mistress somewhere. Even though she knew he didn't love her, she trusted him enough to believe that he was having an affair outside. Worried? Of course, she was worried. Even though she trusted him, she was too curious to have her doubts filled. That was when she discovered the truth, that her husband was indeed having a mistress. She became insecure to know that her husband was meeting another lady aside her. But she had herself consoled that she was his main wife, and perhaps Aurelia was going to remain his mistress. With each night he returned to her arms, craving her, she had herself consoled that it was just a matter of time and he was going to love her back. Maybe when she had given him an heir. With those thoughts, she managed to keep herself consoled for years until he just muttered to her, painting it to her face that she meant nothing to him but a bait. A bait he had used to gain power, a bait he had used to stand strong again on his feet. He never loved her. He used her. The pain, the truth, everything hurt for her to know that she didn't matter to him. It wasn't his fault, was it? She blamed herself fully for throwing herself to him, even though she knew that he never loved her, for giving herself stupid hope that he was going to love her one day. To think that she stashed away her dreams of being a doctor just to please him. All her efforts were just down the drain. Back while she was still in college, she was the youngest, most beautiful, and brightest. She had several guys falling down their knees, begging for just a date with her. But because of her stupid crush on Caleb, she always tossed that aside, replacing it with the hope that he would ask her out one day. Now was the exact time for her to wake up from her high dreams and face reality. She needed to get herself away from the house, and yes, she was going to sign the divorce paper. A soft knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts as she jerked back to reality. "Come in," Evelyn muttered, wiping her tears off her face as she sat up straight, placing the divorce paper aside. "I already microwaved the food. Dinner is ready," Megan, her housemaid, announced as she walked inside the master bedroom. One moment she was walking in, her tone ecstatic, the next, her step faltered as her face pulled into a frown. "Are you all right?" Her tone filled with concern as she queried, hurrying to the bed. "Yes, I'm fine," Evelyn nodded her head. She intended to keep it away from the middle-aged woman, but she knew Megan was going to raise a suspicion. Speaking about the food, she had asked Megan to microwave the food earlier, but then Caleb was already out, so she didn't see the need. "Okay, I'm leaving," Evelyn finally spoke, handing the divorce paper to her. Megan was a lady she cherished and had gotten used to as her acquaintance in Ebeneysville. Staring down at the papers, Megan knew this was for the better. She had watched Evelyn over the years do all her best to retain Caleb's love, which was just overlooked. "I'm together with you in this. I will support you. Love is never forced, it's an emotion. Let go of what you cherish. If it returns, it's meant to be yours," Megan advised. Evelyn nodded her head. With a sigh, she didn't think twice as she scribbled her signature. "I'll need your help in packing." Staring at her ring finger and trying to fight back the urge of tears, Evelyn carefully pulled out the platinum ring with a stunning diamond on the table. When he had presented the ring to her, she had been so excited. Of course, the ring was worth thousands of dollars. It was the talk of the town, and she was a top-rated wife. The happiness that brought her could not be overlooked. But now, the whole charade has come to an end. "I'm done parking, ma'am," Megan announced as she gave Evelyn a sober look. "We will get in touch in one way or the other, Megan. Don't make me regret for doing this." Evelyn tried to shun the pitiful look Megan was flaunting. She knew that was the middle-aged woman's way of saying she was going to miss her, but she needed to stand her ground. "Okay, I know, I'm just saying I'll miss you." Walking closer, she pulled Evelyn into a hug. "I'll be fine." Evelyn felt she needed to say that over and over again to get Megan's worries off her. The sudden ring of her phone had her jolted as she made her way back to the table where her bag was. She wondered if it was Brian, the driver she had called a few minutes ago, calling to inform her of his arrival. But glancing at the caller, her face pulled into a frown as she stared at the unknown number. If she wasn't mistaken, this was the same number that had always texted about Aurelia and Caleb's secret affairs. "Hello," she greeted, but then she met silence as the caller suddenly hung up. "That was weird," Evelyn muttered as she glared at Megan. If the person wasn't a creep, who in their right senses would drop a call without saying a word? The beeping sound of her phone reminded her that a message had just been delivered. Evelyn sighed as she scrolled through her phone and then clicked on the message sent. "Don't you get it, bitch? For how long do you intend to play the understanding wifey?" The text read, taking Evelyn aback. Just when she was trying to recover from the shock, a video popped in. She felt her hand shaking as she clicked on the video, a wave of nervousness washing over her. Her heart was pounding heavily, and she could feel the adrenaline coursing through her body. Her breath quickened, and her palm began to sweat. The video instantaneously came into play, picturing Caleb sitting shirtless on one side of the couch, and then Aurelia standing close to the mirror. Evelyn felt her jaw tighten. So it was Aurelia that was behind the anonymous texts she had always received. "He is mine and mine alone," the caption read. Evelyn felt bitter. If there was anything she felt like at that moment, it was to beat the hell out of that bitch. The sly fox really knows how to play her game for sure. Staring down at her divorce papers, Evelyn felt bitter for ever losing to her. Well, the deed was done, and just like Megan had advised, if you love something, set it free. She already set Caleb free and was, of course, going to try to be fine without his help. He should stick to his mistress, she doesn't give a damn. Staring awkwardly at the contract, she cancelled out the 30% offer that was bargained as alimony. She was going to do fine without him, and without a dime from him. She promised herself. Minutes ago, she had just been broken, but now, she was shattered. Reaching a final decision to part with all reminders of Caleb was a challenging process. She knew it wouldn't be easy to let go of the things that reminded her of Caleb, but she knew it was necessary for her to move on. Some items brought happy memories, like the shimmering red velvet gown she had worn on his last birthday, and the necklace he had bought for her on their first anniversary. Other items held painful memories that she wanted to forget. She was determined to move forward and leave the past behind. The honking sound of the car horn was a reminder that her driver was there to pick her up already, and with the help of Megan, she was able to move just a few of her things to the car, leaving the maids who were on duty mortified. Of course, she owed no one any explanation, but she knew it would be up to Megan and Caleb to break the news. Sparing one last glance at Ebony Sville, she muttered a goodbye as she got inside the car. 1, 2, 3, "Mun, are you sure you're okay?" Lucas asked, referring to the glass of liquor that was down on the floor. "Dude, this isn't the you we all know. What's going on?" Mason chimed in. They had been watching him all along, taking shots after shots. Caleb, taking one more shot, ran his hand through his stubbled jaw and then raked his hand through his hair. He felt so disorganized. He had thought after asking for a divorce he was going to be fine, but instead, he felt like there was something amiss. Like a chessboard, he felt like there was a missing piece. "I'm divorcing Evelyn," he announced, with his gaze still fixed on his glass of liquor. The room fell silent as Caleb's words hung in the air. Everyone looked around at each other in shock, unsure of how to react. No one had seen this coming. "This isn't a joke, is it?" Lucas raised his brow, looking downcast. "Caleb can't joke over such things," Mason spoke out. He knew that if there was anything to joke about, then it can't be about divorce. "We both know I was never in love with her and never wanted to get married to her in the first place, so what, why not?" Caleb defended. That was his main reason, but why was his heart aching this much? "You both were so perfect together, the pictures, magazine front covers, and the beautiful dates you went on, how?" Mason wasn't getting this straight. He knew Evelyn to be this beautiful, curvy, smart, and above all, submissive. Not all ladies can be like that. He could recall the countless dates he had watched them go on and how perfect they seemed for each other. Their relationship made him feel like he needed a spouse too. Those were just for the cameras, just to please my father, Caleb insisted. Another silence. So what's the plan forward now? Mason queried. You aren't going to date Aurelia, are you? Yeah, that was my plan before I was forced to get married to her. Caleb's response took his friends aback, as they stared at him with mouths widened. Wait, you don't mean this, do you? Lucas asked disbelievingly. Yeah, I think I do. Do you realize that your decision is like choosing Sodom and Gomorrah over Jerusalem? Mason asked again. It's my choice and not yours. Caleb staggered to his feet as he struggled to exit the bar. You wouldn't mind me going after her then, would you? Mason asked, causing Caleb to stop right in his tracks. Turquoise eyes were shooting daggers straight at Mason. If eyes could kill, for sure, Mason would have been lying lifeless on the floor. You wouldn't dare. Rushing to where Mason stood, Caleb grabbed him by his shirt as he delivered a punch to his jaw, leaving Lucas to struggle between whose side to be on. Caleb gritted his teeth, jaw clenching as he stepped on the accelerator, driving at a speed of 200 kilometers. He knew this was a death wish, but what else was more than watching another guy kiss Evelyn, give her a smooth massage, and make love to her just like he does? What more was worth it? The thoughts alone drove him insane. He had thought he was going to be free, but why this torment? Why was he going through a series of heartaches? What does his heart truly want? He needed someone to talk to and a place to rest his head. Going back to Ebeneysville was just going to drive him crazy. Perhaps one of his lodges would do, but then again, he doubted he was going to sleep a wink with how troubled his heart was right now. Aurelia? Aurelia was the perfect thought, however, he didn't want to burden her. Still, he had no other person to run to. Taking a U-turn, he started driving back to Aurelia's house at the outskirts of the town. Heartbeats later, there he was standing at Aurelia's door. 1 knock, 2 knocks, 3. And then the door opened, revealing Aurelia putting on a silhouette. He'd wanted to take his eyes off immediately, but then it was just a reminder of Evelyn. How sexy and perfect she had always looked in those. Are you all right? Aurelia with that soft voice of hers asked. Undoubtedly, I'm not, Caleb replied as he entered inside the house. He knew he had a long explanation to do, but he needed to cut it short, just like he did with his friends. I'm divorcing Evelyn. This time the word sounded heavy in his mouth. With each spill he made, he felt his heart tugging at him, reminding him that the main keyword might be just a 9-letter word, but it was really heartbreaking. What? You aren't kidding, are you? Aurelia screamed out. I think it's for the better. It was just an arranged marriage with no emotions attached. He tried to console himself. Are you sure about this? Aurelia asked again as she sat down close to him, held his hands, and tried to assure him in a friendly manner that he was going to be fine. Caleb knew for sure that Aurelia was always the best person to calm him down whenever he was going through turmoil, and right now, he knew she was doing her best. But the thoughts of Evelyn were still going on in his head. I support your decision. You don't have to be tied down to pleasing people forever. You have the right to move away from things that don't give you happiness. The right to make your choice, Aurelia spoke so wisely to his hearing. Giving a huge sigh, Caleb rested his head on his sofa. He felt weak. His system numbed. The effect of the alcohol he had taken earlier was taking a toll on him right now, and all he needed was to rest. His eyes were heavy, and his eyelids drooped, as if weighted down by the events of the night before. He tried to blink away the tiredness, but his eyes just felt heavier. It was as if he was fighting a losing battle, the fatigue taking over his body, and a few minutes away, his soft snores were heard as he slept peacefully. PM13 staring at the sleepy Caleb, Aurelia smiled to herself. This was a perfect moment. The happiness she felt inside of her could not be measured. It was just a matter of time, and Caleb was going to be hers finally. Getting her phone, she snuggled close to Caleb, placing her head on his chest, and pulling her silhouette up to reveal her thigh. She rested it on his legs, and then took pictures of them in that position. This would be a great picture to send to Evelyn. She smirked to herself, and without wasting time, she sent the pictures over to her using a one-time view. Recalling the journey on how she had gone with Caleb, she had always been with him, supported him, and she knew Caleb was in love with her and was going to get married to her. But the twist came when Caleb was tied to an arranged marriage with her opponent, Evelyn. 5 years she was persistent and didn't want to give up. 5 years she still stood with Caleb, hoping her time would come. 5 years she consoled herself that Caleb was going to return to her. And she did everything within her power. The thoughts alone that Caleb was going to return to her made her happy. Of course, it was proof that her efforts weren't in vain. She really hopes Evelyn could sign the contract for real. As Caleb stirred from his slumber, he immediately felt the pounding in his head. The light streaming in through the window felt like 1,000 needles poking into his eyes. He reached up to rub his temples, trying to alleviate the pain. But the more he moved, the more the pain intensified. He slowly realized that the alcohol from the night before was to blame. His mouth was dry and his stomach churned, making him feel even worse. "Are you all right?" Aurelia walked up to him, making him halt in his stride as he turned to face her. "I'm fine, I'm sorry if I woke you up," he apologized, knowing it might have been the sound of his walk step that had her woken. "It's fine. You don't look good," Aurelia's soft voice whispered as she wrapped her hand around his shoulder and walked him down to the sofa. "You're heating up. Give me a few minutes, I'll be back." Heading to the kitchen, Aurelia quickly prepared a hot soup for him, and in no time, she was back to where he lay. Memories swept down Caleb's head as he recalled years ago while he had an injury, and Aurelia had successfully nursed him back until he was fine. He stood up from the couch and drank the soup from Aurelia slowly, until he was done with the entire plate. "Thank you," he muttered softly. The drive to Evanesville was meant to be a 20-minute drive, but to Caleb, it was taking forever. So many thoughts were roaming through his head, which he couldn't even place his hands on. Resting his hands on his jaw as he drove, he doubted if he was ever going to make it to work that morning. He had breakfast with Aurelia and was hoping to get home, then walk straight inside his room without sparing Evelyn his attention. After what seemed like forever, he was finally in Evanesville. Driving the car inside the garage and heading to the door of the mansion, the butler assisted him with his coat as he stepped inside the room. As Caleb stepped into the house, it seemed eerily quiet. The stillness of the air was unnerving, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. It was as if something was missing, some small detail that he couldn't put his finger on. Or maybe it was just the headache and fatigue playing tricks on his mind. He tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered like a cloud of gloom over his head. His eyes ran into the dining table, expecting to see Evelyn with those long flowing gowns scat right on her favorite spot waiting for him before she had breakfast. But then, the dining was empty, just the usually 3-course meal, but there was no sign of her. That was weird. He took steady strides towards the table, and then staring at the dishes, his gaze went to the maid that was standing close. "Did Evelyn make this?" he queried, hoping she'd gone to the kitchen to get something or was perhaps waiting for him in the room. But one thing was certain: the meal was still untouched, which simply meant that she hadn't eaten yet. "No, but it was prepared by Megan," the maid replied, much to his dismay. Nodding his head, he continued walking to the master bedroom, hoping he was going to find her there. But on opening the door, his eyes met with the emptiness of the house. There was no sign of Evelyn. Taking the last resolve to check her at her favorite spot, which was the swimming pool where she'd be swimming. That was a resort she had always loved whenever she was having a tough time. He took a deep breath, wondering why he was carrying out this search instead of just minding his business and staking the claim that he wants a divorce. However, getting to the swimming pool was a different story entirely. His turquoise eyes stared at the calm environment. The water was still and looked as though no one had visited there since morning, and there was no sign of her lurking around either. Frustrated, he went back to the room, with his chest heaving heavily. Where would she have gone? He thought to himself, raking his hands through his hair. "Welcome, sir." Megan greeted him. She was trying to lay the bed, which was weird. This was majorly a task Evelyn does by herself. That morning was just so odd. First was the food being prepared by Megan, and now his bed was also being laid by Megan. He was tempted to call Evelyn and ask her why the unusual changes. He knew he had asked for a divorce, but he would still appreciate her carrying out her chores before the paper is signed and everything is finalized. "Where is Evelyn?" he asked Megan, trying to keep his cool. Megan raised her brow at her boss. He was indeed lucky that he was the boss of her. If not, she'd be smacking his head right now for being such a coward, letting such a huge treasure like Evelyn slip off his finger without thinking twice. He, for sure, needs someone to sit him down and have a long talk with, but she, a mere maid, has no right to carry out such. She loves her job and still needs to foot bills. She left. Her response took him by surprise, as he quirked his brow to look at her. She did what? It was as if he had just heard the formidable, and just then his eyes zeroed to the bed where a white folded paper lay. Walking up to the bed, he felt his hands vibrating as he unfolded it. "I'm sorry, sir," Megan muttered as she walked outside, closing the door behind her. His heart beat loudly, giving a lube-dub noise as he read it. She signed his divorce paper. She signed it. It was signed. His heart was beating heavily as he glared at the signed document. This was so unusual. This wasn't the first time he had been bringing up the issue of divorce all through their 5 years of marriage. He had, in fact, reminded her almost each passing day. Why now? Why did she choose to do it without him knowing? Why? He felt his heart pounding heavily as he stared one more time at the divorce papers. It was quite unusual that Evelyn had chosen to leave just like that without a word being said, without arguing it out with him. It was so unlike her, who after exchanging heated words with him, would still prepare his breakfast, run a shower for him, and still carry on with house chores like nothing ever happened. Where did that Evelyn go? As Caleb stood there, holding the signed divorce papers in his hand, 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. Why had she done this without talking to him? Had he really been so blind to her unhappiness? Was there anything he could have done to change the outcome? The questions swirled around in his head, and he felt completely lost. He sank down onto the bed, burying his head in his hands. It was as if his whole world had been turned upside down, and he didn't know how to fix it. Damn. Squeezing the divorce paper, Caleb stashed it towards the door, his fist curled into a brawl. He felt his chest rising, anger coursing through his vein. His breath became rapid and shallow as he stared at the divorce papers in his hand. He could feel the rage bubbling up inside of him, hot and searing. He gripped the paper tightly, his fist clenched so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to rip the papers into 1,000 pieces, to let his anger out in some way. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. He just stood there, breathing heavily, trying to calm himself down. Caleb closed his eyes, trying to focus on his breathing. In and out, in and out. But with each breath the anger was still there. He could feel his pulse pounding in his temples, and he knew he couldn't keep himself under control for much longer. He had thought the divorce was going to set his heart at peace, but there he was so troubled. His thoughts wandered to the years he had spent with Evelyn. She was his childhood friend. They grew up together. Memories flooded down his head, down from when he was a child and had rescued her from getting drowned. He had watched her embrace her fears and make the water her best friend. Down to how she had become fond of him and had always approached him with every tiny difficulty she was facing. He had always looked down at her like his younger sister. The sudden beep of his phone jerked him from his thought as he glanced at the caller, his hope placed for it to be Evelyn. Staring at the caller, Aurelia was written boldly on the phone. He sighed, contemplating on picking it or not. After much thought, "Hi Aurelia," he greeted. "Hello Caleb, you wouldn't believe this, I finally have a job," Aurelia screamed through the phone. On another occasion, Caleb would have been very much excited about such news, but for the fact that he wasn't in a pleasant mood, he just nodded his head. "Congratulations." He tried to sound as nice as he could, and with that bade her a goodbye as he hung up. After series of tossing from one side of the bed to another, Caleb resolved to placing a call through to Evelyn. He knew he'd had his pride trampled on, but something in him urged him to do so. Perhaps he'd finally get to have his mind at rest. Grabbing his phone, he clicked on her name as he tried to place a call through to her. After a second attempt, his trials proved abortive as he was directed to placing a voicemail instead. Agitated, he stashed the phone to the wall, watching as it scattered to the floor. Shrugging his shoulder, he stood to his feet as he headed for the bathroom, resolving to tell his parents about the divorce. Perhaps that would fill the relief in him he needed rather than pondering on an action that was already carrying out. Few minutes later, Caleb was back in the road, but this time his destination was to his parents' house. As he drove down the long driveway, the familiar iron gates loomed ahead. He could see the house beyond them, the three-story mansion with its stately columns and ornate Georgian architecture. The trees and flowers that surrounded the house were lush and overgrown, almost obscuring the view of the house itself. He got out of the car and made his way to the front door, feeling the eyes of the staff upon him. As he approached, they stood to attention, their faces a picture of polite respect. He returned their nods with a small smile, but inside he was feeling anything but friendly. This place held too many memories, both good and bad. Today, he just wanted to get in and out as quickly as possible. As he stepped inside the foyer, his gaze went to the sitting room where his father was, and from where he stood, he could hear little whispers which meant he was perhaps having a visitor. The light chuckle of laughter he heard drawed his attention to who the visitor was. He was sure that he could recall that voice from anywhere. Evelyn. Walking closer to where they sat, he cleared his throat trying to get their attention, which of course he succeeded. His father sat up straight, revealing Evelyn's face from the other end. "You're here." His father gave him a casual, disappointed look. Of course, what else was he expecting? A nice smile congratulating him for a job well done for annulling his 5 years marriage. That wasn't his father's, rather he'd sit him down for hours and give him a series of long lectures. "It seems I'm not welcome here." Walking to the couch, he slouched down, stealing a glance from Evelyn. "I wasn't expecting you," his father defended. Caleb stuttered, gritting his teeth together, unsure of how to fix the proper words. "Evelyn has informed me of her desire to dissolve your marriage," he began as if reading his mind, his tone solemn. I will not stand in the way of her decision, as I believe you are both capable of making your own choices, and since this is a mutual decision, I wish you both the best." His words were measured and calm, but Caleb could sense the underlying sadness. This was not the way things were supposed to be. Taking another peep at Evelyn, she sat so quiet and reserved without saying a word, and without even sparing him a glance, she acted as if he wasn't present there with them. He missed her. Even though it was hard for him to admit it, he felt it. He could tell that behind her calm reserved face, there was a sadness behind it. He wished they could have one more last word together, and before he could speak up, she stood up gathering the hem of her gown as she started walking away. "I'm so sorry, I'm running out of time, I have a schedule fixed with those cute of hers," she mumbled, kissing her father's cheek, and without one word being said from her to him, she headed for the door. It's been 1 month with hopes raised high, a month away without any form of contact from Evelyn. Caleb had tried every possible means of communication to get to her: calls, texts, social media platforms, all methods. He was blocked from every single platforms. Seated outside with the cool evening breeze coursing through his body, his driver walked up to him. Seeing his driver, he sat up straight, knowing Mark was back. His hopes was raised high. He knew his driver had the news that could either make him or break him. "What did she say?" he queried, his turquoise eyes firmly on his driver, Mark. "I'm afraid, sir, there is no positive change." Here Mark spoke, handing him the divorce certificate. His eyes suddenly turned. The neon lights of the club pulsed, bathing the dance floor in a rainbow of colors. Bodies moved in time to the pounding music, creating a sea of human motion. Ashley, Evelyn's friend, stood at the center of the dance floor, her eyes scanning the crowd. A smile tugged on her lips as she caught sight of her target, and she raised her drink in a toast. "Y'all, I have an important information to pass," she yelled at the top of her voice, trying to get attention on her. Everywhere became calm, as almost all eyes was directed on her with utmost anticipation, wondering what news she wants to unravel. "Evelyn is single, guys. And ready to mingle," she called out, her voice carrying over the music. The news was met with cheers and applause as the other women in the club celebrated their friend's newfound independence. "You got to be kidding me." The gaspies was heard as everyone turned their head to face Evelyn. From where she sat, Evelyn felt her face turned crimson as all eyes were directed at her. Why were they all excited for her? Getting divorced? She didn't really say that as a big deal. "You have no idea how excited I am." Ashley, with a glass of sex in the beach wine, sashayed to where she sat, making a toast with the glass as she laughed excitedly. "I'm baffled on how excited you are for me getting divorced when it was supposed to be the other way round," Evelyn drawled sarcastically. "Yeah right, of course I have to celebrate your freedom. Like 5 years, good fucking 5 years in a jail called marriage with you trying to impress a stupid someone that doesn't even sees your worth till date." Ashley rolled her eyes as she spoke so freely. She had never been in support of her getting married to Caleb. As a matter of fact, Ashley stopped visiting her and kept their friendship at arm's length after she got married to Caleb. "You're a sly fox." Evelyn rolled her eyes as she slipped from her wine. Even without being told, she wondered how Ashley was able to find out that she was going through hell in her marital home. Of course, they had been birds of the same feathers, almost sharing the same thoughts. "Hi ladies," a voice greeted, drawing their attention as they stared up. "Oh, yeah, he comes." Ashley's face pulled into a beam as she stared up at Cole. Cole had been one of Evelyn's diehard admirer back before she got married. It started from sending her anonymous letters, gifts and texts. Evelyn had always hoped those texts and gifts should be from Caleb, but however, he seemed so clueless whenever she brought the hint. It took Cole months before he could finally reveal himself to her as her secret admirer. However, it was too late as Evelyn was already prepared to tie down the knot with Caleb. Evelyn's eyes widened as she stared at Cole. 5 years without seeing him, and he wasn't looking so different. His gentle look was still in place, his cute dimples was very obvious even without smiling. He was handsome no doubt, but still far-fetched from Caleb. "Damn," she muttered, having the urge to hit her head for still thinking of Caleb even at a time like this. "Hi Cole," she stuttered, trying to return his gesture as she forced a smile on her face. "It's been years, so I would leave you guys to talk more." Ashley was quick to stand to her feet as she gave Evelyn a wink, and they walked away. "One sly fox," Evelyn muttered under her breath. She knew what Ashley was up to once again, and she was very sure that she'd invited Cole over without letting her know. "You're still looking pretty, more like a younger version." Cole broke the awkward tension that was existing between them. Suddenly, it felt 16 again, the awkward moment where she had always blushed and shy away whenever a guy had complimented how good she was looking. Those moments were seeming to be occurring again. "Thank you, you look nice too." She tried to keep the conversation cool, even though she was finding it difficult. It's been years. Aside from the usual compliment Megan had always tossed her with, she hadn't gotten any truly genuine one. She only get reminded at night from Caleb how perfect her body was for him. At least that was something he had always appreciated. This conversation was so going to be awkward, knowing how she had turned Cole down and instead showed him the ring on her finger with the pride that she was going to be getting married soon to Caleb. You know, I never knew I was going to meet with you again. Evelyn knew Cole was doing his best in trying to keep the conversation forward, but she was just so lost in her thought thinking of something else. Oh, really? I thought Ashley prepped you. She didn't, I swear. She had only invited me for a drink. I never knew she invited you too, Cole defended, pouring out a glass of wine for her and also for himself. Ashley will forever be Ashley. How can she forget that? Her crooky way can never be predictable. You know, after your rejection, I still haven't gotten over you, despite the fact that you're married. Cole gave her a soft look as he spoke truthfully. Evelyn had always liked him because of his sincerity. I'm divorced. She broke the news to him, showing her finger without the ring. Perhaps this wasn't a right time to let him know, but she had to spill the truth. Just then, she watched as his once gloomy face lit up. She could tell that he was excited, and the glint of his eyes was so obvious that he was battling to keep his excitement at check. Would you care to dance with me? Cole queried, extending his hands. Evelyn smiled, nodding her head. It's just a harmless dance. Extending her hand, she stood to her feet as Cole walked her down to the dance floor. The soft music swirled around Cole and Evelyn as they danced to the tune of the music. Evelyn was too lost in her thought, weighing back to when she had her first dance with Cole. It had been so beautiful, with her heart beating heavily. It remains one of the most beautiful dance she ever had. Evelyn suddenly jerked back to reality at the sudden change of the music, quite enough to glance through her environment. They were surrounded with other couples, swirling and dancing just like they were. Just then her eyes caught sight of that familiar Zegna suit, well ironed and had this strong aura. Evelyn could tell who that individual was from anywhere. Caleb. Her throat burned with fury as she watched his hands snaked round a female waist. She was sure that it was no other female other than Aurelia. Just then, his eyes turned to face her, blue eyes met with turquoise own. She felt her stomach churned, her teeth gritted together as she stared into his eyes. Evelyn, you can do this. Just pretend like they are not there, and that's simple. Close your eyes, pretend like he isn't here. She gave herself that advice, as she quickly turned her eyes away from him even though it was hard. What had her pained was the fact that he had those hands snaked around Aurelia's waist, and it was just so perfect, like they were a perfect fit. Are you all right? Cole was smart enough to observe that something was placed off. Evelyn hesitated for a while. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just feeling a little tired, Evelyn lied. From the beginning, Caleb never wanted to come to this stupid club, but then Aurelia had him convinced that it was just a way to relieve his mood, and trust him, it was working for a while, but then again everything just seems to remind him about Evelyn, the dance, the music, it was her favorite movie, and all he could picture was her sitting in that favorite corner in their room, either trying to roll her hair into a bun, or creaming her body, as she hummed the song. Still staring right at the scene in front of him, he watched as a gentleman held her by her waist, and was dancing slowly. His jaw tightened as he took in the scene before him. He felt anger coursing through him, the sudden urge of matching to where they were dancing and delivering a punch to that guy took over him. Suddenly, the guy's face turned facing him, revealing his identity. Cole. That was Cole, Evelyn diehard admirer. He had seen him sneak love letters and gifts from their family house window to Evelyn house years back. The fact that it wasn't some random guy but Cole made him more infuriated. It was more like Cole was lurking around waiting for them to get divorced in order for him to claim Evelyn. He had never felt defeated in his life before. Throughout this life as a businessman and a student, he had always worked hard. Success drove him, but now he felt like he hadn't only lost a gem but was also defeated. One moment he was still lost in his thoughts, swaying with Aurelia, with his head doing so many calculations. The next, he lifted his brow again in their direction. Just then his eyes narrowed into hers. His blue eyes met with her turquoise own. At that moment, he felt everything in the world came to a still as he stared at her. He had so much to say, and not to mention dragging her away, and giving a stern warning to that guy to stake his hands away from his property. His eyes took in her beautiful features, staring from her upturned jaw, to the contour of her well-pointed nose, then to her full lips, which was inviting him to have a taste. His eyes trailed further down to the turkey gown she was putting on, leaving her neck exposed, and some of her cleavages came popping out from the gown. Damn, she looks as hot as hell. Evelyn was never a type to wear such dresses, neither was she the club kind of person. How did she ended up looking so hot, so beautiful? It made him felt worthless, like he was the reason behind her gloominess. Just few months away from their divorce, and there she was looking so radiant. She looked away abruptly, like he never existed, an action that made his heart pierce into pieces like a knife was piercing through it. Gnashing his teeth together, he sets Aurelia hands free as he made to walk away. "Where are you going to?" Aurelia tugged at his suit as she halted him, her brow rose quizzically. Staring at her hands, he was short of words. Instead, he gently removed her hands away from his suit as he started walking back. "Are you heading?" Aurelia's voice got stuck in her throat as she sighted Evelyn at the other end of the dance floor. She needed no one to tell her the cause of Caleb's change of mood. Instead, she quickly intertwined her hands with Caleb and trailed behind him, gnashing her teeth in anger. Just when she thought she was completely winning over him, and then Evelyn decided to ruin it for her. Staring one more time at the dance floor where she had seen Caleb dancing with Aurelia, Evelyn noticed he had left. With a sigh and a flabbergasted look, she removed Cole's hands from her waist as she marched down to her table. "Evelyn," Cole called after her as he hurried to catch up with her. "Is everything all right? Did I hurt you in any ways?" Cole asked, wondering why she had left in such a haste. "No, I'm kind of feeling not too well," she lied. "I saw you watching him, you know," Ashley whispered in her ear as she hugged her tightly. That sly fox would always know every single damn thing about her. Cole, who took it as a time to give them the girly space, brought out his phone as he fully concentrated in it. "I still love him," Evelyn whispered back as she blinked rapidly, trying to fight the tears that was about dropping from her eyes. Evelyn, with a determined grip, she picked up the bottle of whiskey and poured a generous measure into her glass. She didn't stop until it was almost full to the brim, her eyes fixed on the amber liquid as it swirled around the glass. Her goal was to drink enough to forget about him, to numb the pain he had caused her. The hangover would be brutal, but it would be better than feeling the heartbreak. She downed the glass in one gulp, savoring the burn as it went down her throat. "Don't tell me you're taking another glass." Ashley tried to stop Evelyn from taking another shot. But a sober look from Evelyn made her thought twice. She knew her friend was in pain, and if the alcohol was going to help her forget the pain, then she wasn't going to stop her. With the third shot of whiskey in her system, Evelyn found herself giggling at nothing in particular. The world around her was starting to spin, and she felt a strange sense of euphoria. It was almost as if she was floating, untethered from the reality that had been weighing her down. Her laughter grew louder, echoing around the empty room, but she didn't care. She was drunk on alcohol and freedom, and nothing else mattered in that moment. "He said he never wanted to see me again," Evelyn exclaimed, her laughter ringing out through the bar. Her voice was high-pitched and manic, and she was clearly intoxicated. The other patrons in the bar turned to look at her, some with amusement, others with concern. She didn't seem to notice or care, lost in her own world of intoxicated hysteria. Ashley quickly came to the aid of her friend, trying to prevent Evelyn from making a fool of herself. "Let me be, I need to spill." Evelyn, even in her intoxicated state, was still powerful enough to push Ashley away from her. Cole was quick to actions as he held Ashley from falling to the fall. "Don't worry, I'll take care of this. Get her bag. We are leaving here now. Place a hand on her and you're dead." That cold voice warned, with anger seething through it as he casted Cole a killer glare. "Let's go home," Caleb whispered to Evelyn, pulling her close to his body as she leaned on his chest, her head resting on his chest. Suddenly she felt the fiery furnace in her went cool. It was as if he was the answer to her problems. As Caleb held Evelyn in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder, he couldn't help but breathe in her sweet scent. He felt a sense of protectiveness towards her as he carried her out of the club and towards his car. She was so vulnerable in that moment, and he felt a need to take care of her. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced before, and it left him feeling a bit disoriented. He couldn't take his eyes off her from the moment he left the dance floor. His heart was racing, and he couldn't stop thinking about her. He felt like a stalker, watching her through the back door, but he couldn't help himself. As he watched her take shot after shot of liquor, Caleb's protective instincts kicked in. He knew she wasn't the type to drink excessively, and the amount she was consuming was going to affect her. He wanted to walk over and take the bottle away from her, but he held back, unsure of how she would react. He had barely ended his thought when he heard her screamed right in the bar. His dear and indecision disappeared, replaced by a sense of urgency. He knew he had to act, and in that moment he decided to come out from his hiding and pull the bull by its horn. Placing her gently in the car, he started the car as he drove off, his destination, Ebeneysville. Aurelia's blood boiled as she watched Caleb approach Evelyn, his eyes full of concern. She clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms, as she struggled to control her rage. She was fuming with jealousy. Since the moment they left the dance floor, Caleb had barely spoken a word to her, despite her efforts to get his attention. No matter how hard she tried to make him see that she was there for him, he only warned her to stay away, and then walked off without a word. She felt abandoned, her heart ached as she watched him left there and disappear into the crowd to God knows where. The tempting urge to follow him was strong, but Aurelia knew it would only lead to more heartbreak. She had waited for him 5 years of her life, 5 years, and it was clear that he had started harboring feelings for Evelyn even though they were divorced. Her chest pounded furiously as she curled her fist into a brawl she knew deserved better than to be treated like an afterthought. Watching him pop out of the blue as he hurried to help the drunken Evelyn made her heart beat furiously. She doubted she could any longer control the hurt and anger that were spilling over. Grabbing her phone, she placed a call through to Caleb. First ring, second ring, third. No response, and then she resolved to send him a voicemail asking him to come and pick her, accompanied by series of messages which she waited for hours, and yet there was no response. "You know I was waiting for you, so you came." Evelyn stuttered, holding Caleb's by his shirt. The liquor was really having an effect on her, she could barely tell from her left and right. Caleb, short of words, only stared at her. He didn't even know what to say. He missed her. "Answer me." Dragging his ear, she demanded, laughing at his expression. "Oh damn. She's worse when drunk." He hadn't seen her in this state before, never. His major concern was to get her out of the car and take her inside. She had been Southwest quiet during the drive and had only stirred when they had gotten to Ebeneysville. "Wait," Evelyn muttered as he made to carry her. One moment he was startled to why he had asked her to wait, the next, he felt liquid pouring on his body and spilling over to his Bugatti Divo seats. His eyes widened as he looked up at her. His suit was soaked and his car also by her vomit. Staring at her, she held this innocent look as she kept calm and rested her head back on the chair, like she had done nothing wrong. With a sigh, he took at his coat and then his shirt before carrying her over his shoulder as he headed inside to the mansion. As usual, his butler was standing at the door waiting for him. "Order one of the servants to go take care of my care and move my things in, but first I need you to fetch Megan for me," Caleb ordered, walking to his room. It was quite obvious that the butler was surprised at the sight of his boss carrying his ex-wife on his shoulder. Even the maids as he walked was whispering at the sight. Getting to the master bedroom, Caleb aced her gently on the bed and then sighed out relievedly. But still, he had to bathe her and wash of the puke off her. Gently, he started unclothing her. Taking off her clothes was something he'd do under a minute, but this time, since she was on a drunken state, he had to do it gently. A soft knock on the door didn't stop him from undressing as he only muttered for the person to come in. He knew it's be no one else other than Megan. "You called for me, sir." Megan bowed, closing the door behind her as she tried to announce her presence. Sighting a sleepy Evelyn on the bed, she felt her heart leaked out for joy. She'd had heard the rumors from the maids that their boss's wife was back, but she had wanted to confirm her doubt first. "Yes, I need you to prepare a chicken noodle soup, just as she like it," Caleb ordered, referring to Evelyn. 15 minutes later, Caleb was done with bathing her, and he had her dressed in a big shirt of his. Megan had never seen her boss this way since she's had been working for them. He looked so worried, so disoriented and scared. She could tell. "Is she sick?" With concern written on her voice, Megan dared to ask. "No, she'll be fine." Precise, his response came. Megan knew her boss was not going to spare any pep talk, so she reserved any further questions until Evelyn would be fine. With a bow, she placed the bowl of chicken noodle soup and then headed outside. Spoon-feeding Evelyn didn't talk up to 10 minutes, which after Caleb placed her to sleep as he sat close to their bedside and watched her sleeps. His eyes took in her sleepy features, staring from her nose down to her lips. His eyes lingered for minutes there as he recounted the soft feel of her lips on his. He missed her, heaven knows he really do missed her. Placing a soft kiss on her forehead, he stood up to turn off the light and then joined her in bed. Wrapping his hands around Eros, he cuddled her close to his chest. She was just so perfect for him. He hoped they could stay that way for long. With this thought, his eyes closed, drifting as he slept soundly. "Please, don't leave. I love you, Caleb, please." The soft whisper woke Caleb from his sleep. Placing his hands on Evelyn, he patted her back gently. It was a nightmare as she was still fast asleep. "It's okay, I've got you," Caleb whispered, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. He was so close to her, he could feel her breath on his face. It was all he could do to resist the urge to kiss her. He knew it would be wrong, but the temptation was strong. Instead, he held her close, letting her sob into his chest. "I'm here. I'm sorry I've left you in the past, but this time, I won't leave," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. However, Evelyn went to soft on him, wrapping her hand around him as she gave him her lips instead. One quick taste wouldn't hurt, he thought as his lips brushed her gently and soft. For he meant to pull away, to end the kiss before it went too far. But then her lips parted and her breath mingled with his, and he was lost. He knew he should stop, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The taste of her was intoxicating, and he wanted more. His hand found the back of her head, and he deepened the kiss, losing himself in the moment. Her hands went for his chest, running her hands through his abs. "I want you, Caleb, please take me." Her voice came as a whisper, sending the self-control he had choose to retain to the mud. Her body was like a drug to his system, so who was he to reject his medicine when she was all he needed to heal? His lips claimed her fiercely, his hands undoing her shirt button. Turning her over, he made her lay on her hand as he slid inside of her from behind. "God," Evelyn moaned, his full length entering inside of her. Damn. She had missed him so damn much. His strokes was slow and sensual, sending shivers running down Evelyn's spine. With each stroke he made, he took her to attain the same heights with her. Slow and gentle it was, but Evelyn could tell that it had a lot of emotions in it. It was unusual of Caleb, he'd prefer rough and fast, but this time, the case was reverse. The warm sunlight streamed through Evanesville window gradually enough to wake Evelyn from her slumber. She blinked, trying to shake off the last traces of sleep from her eyes. The clock on the nightstand read "M," and she knew it was time to start the day. As she made to stand up, she felt a hand on her waist holding her down. Turning to her back, she took in the sight of the sleepy Caleb, with his hands wrapped around her. A lock of hair fell across his face, giving him a cute boyish look. That moment, she felt like giving him a kiss, but instead, she gently removed his hands from her waist as she stood up gently from the bed. Staring down at her body, she smiled. She had his shirt on, and recalling last night only made her heart swirled. Evelyn lazily made her way to the bathroom, where she had a quick shower. She couldn't believe she was back at Evanesville again. Recounting the last time she left broken and shattered, Evanesville was her last dream. But then again, recalling the incident from last night, and how she had ended up getting drunk with Caleb challenging Cole. She could still feel that he cares about her. But then why did he divorce her? Stepping out from the restroom, her body felt relaxed and refreshed. Caleb was still fast asleep, but her mind was still reeling from the events of the night before. Every touch and kiss played like a movie in her head, the sensations lingering on her skin. She could still feel Caleb's hands on her, his mouth exploring her body, his whispered words of desire. She knew she should feel guilty as his ex-wife, but she couldn't bring herself to regret what they had done. It had been so long since she had felt that kind of passion, and she couldn't deny the spark that had reignited between them. Funny how a part of her wanted to spend more time with Caleb, and the other part wanted to get away from him as fast as possible. With a towel tied to her chest, she walked to her favorite spot where she had usually sat facing the mirror and creamed herself. She gently applied cream on her body. "Good morning," she heard that familiar deep morning bass in her voice, his height towering above her chair. His image was reflecting on the mirror. She didn't need to turn back to greet him. "Hi," she replied, her face burning red. Staring at his face from the window, he was still looking as handsome as ever. "Remember to take the pills." Evelyn's brow rose at the comment. She was having a nice moment fantasizing about him, not until she heard the formidable "pills." Creasing her brow, she turned to look at him. As she looked at him, her eyes widened in disbelief, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. Her gaze lingered on his face, searching for any sign that he was joking. But his expression remained serious, and she realized he was serious about what he had said. How could she forget about the fact that she had been on a birth control pills for 5 years of their marriage simply because he had always said he never wanted a child yet? It was a mutual agreement she had agreed to simply because she loved him and had to play the respectful wife. And now, even when they were divorced, he still was very concerned about her carrying his child. How fantastic. It was so obvious that he was, of course, just after her body, nothing else. Just her body. How blind has she been? "Yes, I'm still taking the pills," she lied, and just then she saw him let out a sigh of relief. "I'll be back, I need to use the restroom real quick." She watched as he shoved the locks of hair that had fallen across his face to the back, his hands folded across his chest as he stared at her with those blue eyes of his. "I'll be leaving soon," Evelyn revealed with anger coursing through her. "I'll drive you home," he offered, though he didn't want to see her leave. He wished she could stay longer, but the look on her face told him that something was weighing on her mind. He had no idea what it was, and he wasn't sure how to fix things, but he wanted to make things better if he could. Running the Winthrop firm for close to a decade without any failure was something he took pride in, but his expertise in numbers and facts didn't translate well to reading and understanding emotions. He knew how to deal with numbers, not with feelings. That was an area where he always felt a little lost. "Never mind, I already hired a cab," Evelyn lied. She tried to hide the hurt on her face as she buried her face to the floor as if she was searching for something. "I insist," his voice came out somewhat demanding. It took Evelyn just a glare to put him back to his position. She was no longer the dutiful housewife, so he should know his place. Okay, fine, Caleb's voice dropped as he raised his hands up in surrender. He knew something was wrong. This wasn't the Evelyn he had made love to last night and heard her moan his name. He was expecting a reconciliation by morning, and not to be presented with this. Evelyn, with her gaze still glued to the mirror, stood to her feet as she grabbed her phone, and just immediately she ordered for a ride as she started packing her things. I'll be in the bathroom, I'll be back real quick, he made known to her as he ran his hands through his hair, giving this confused look, and then walked inside. Okay, Evelyn nodded her head, still without sparing him a glance. Immediately he left. Evelyn made for her bag as she carried it outside, hoping to wait for the driver outside. She couldn't stand it any longer. After coming out from the cozy shower, Caleb felt his heart caught in his throat as he couldn't catch any sign of Evelyn. His eyes went to the mirror where she had sat, but it turned out to be empty. Just his reflection was staring back at him. The body lotion and other skincare were placed carefully right where they used to be, but there was no sign of Evelyn. His eyes quickly went to where he had kept her bag missing. And then he knew that she was nowhere around the house. His impulse kicked in immediately. He felt his heart beating unanimously. Grabbing a shirt from his wardrobe, he quickly wore it on, and also a shorts. He knew how awful he looked wearing a shirt and a short, but of course that wasn't what mattered now. He needed to find Evelyn at all cost. With his hair uncombed, he rushed outside. Darn it, he muttered under his breath. Immediately he just came outside and then saw a black Maserati car driving away. He caught sight of Evelyn's hair, and that was enough to tell him that she had just left him again. Not again, he yelled out. Staring back at the shadows of Ebonysville, Evelyn sniffed in the tears that were struggling to flow down her cheeks. Her chest was beating heavily. He was still the same, all over again. Staying in the state will only give her heartbreak. Can you please take the second route? I'm changing my destination. Just drive me to the airport instead. Evelyn spoke to the driver as she brought out her phone from her bag. Hi Ashley, please can you help me pack most of my things, and also my passport? I'm heading to the airport right away. Placing a call through to Ashley, who picked up at the second ring, Evelyn inquired. Why? What's wrong? She trusted Ashley to question. There's a lot of explanation which can't be made right now. I promise to say all maybe later. Just get it for me, okay? Evelyn inhaled. Sure, swim. I got you, I'll be there in minutes. Ashley hung up. Immediately Evelyn hung up from the call. She made an online booking, and then when she got to the port, she waited for Ashley, hoping she would be on time before the flight took off. And just 15 minutes before the flight took off, Ashley drove in. I was almost panicking, and I was about to call you. Evelyn collecting her luggage from Ashley, she pulled her into a hug. I'll miss you and your troubles. Evelyn laughed as she pulled back. You mean the other way round? You owe me a long conversation, so just get into that plane and arrive safely, and then give me a full gist of everything that happened. Ashley, pulling her ears playfully, ordered. Ouch, yes, I sure will. Can you leave cars now? Unless you want me to miss my flight. In as much as I want you to miss it, I can't afford the consequences. So bye, sweet. Evelyn quickly hurried to the plane, blowing Ashley a kiss. The flight was just an hour flight, and in no time, Ashley was already in her hometown. 5 years she had been away, and there was not much difference. Palmer Preston, hailing a cab, Evelyn mentioned their house. Of course, Palmer Preston was a renowned house that belonged to the reputable Palmers, a lineage which is known for their medical reputation. Evelyn arrived at their mansion, dragging her suitcase along with her. She clicked on the doorbell, waiting for the door to be opened. Oh my God, Mrs. Avery, their head housekeeper, yelled out as she opened the door. The flower vase she was holding shattered to the floor, making a crashing sound. Hi, Mrs. Avery. Evelyn shrugged, her face beaming with a smile. Evelyn. Mrs. Avery replied, her voice booming through the room, as if she had just seen a ghost. Evelyn. Evelyn could tell whose voice was that. She quickly entered inside, and she threw herself on her mother's arm. Mom, she squeaked happily, her hands wrapping her mother's back as she engulfed her in a tight hug. Look at you, Evelyn. I never thought I was going to see you again. Her mom's voice came out so teary. She knew her mother was almost at the point of breaking down now. Sweetheart, you didn't tell me you were. Wait, what? Evelyn is here. That was her father halting on his speech as he strode into the sitting room. She had told them about her divorce with Caleb, but she had failed to mention that she was going to be back soon. That was just a last-minute decision she came up with. So, of course, she expected them to be all surprised. Yeah, that was because I wanted to surprise you all. Speaking of which, Dad, you look so tired, and it seems we could get some rest. Of course, I'll be tired. Had a sleepless night in the surgery room carrying out a brain tumor surgery. At this age, I'd be resting, but since our only daughter decided to make her marriage her priority, what else can I do? Her father spoke up, the truth slicing down deep her chest, making the atmosphere tense as the room suddenly went quiet. Oh, come on, darling, there's a lot you need to catch up with. You know, several things happened while you were away, and trust me, in going to fill you in with all, bit by bit. Her mother dragged her hands, trying to make light of the situation. Dad, you don't mind me joining now, do you? Evelyn suddenly yelled out, removing her hands from her mother's own as she turned to face her father. Joining? What? She heard her father stuttering, and she smiled. Years back, it had been her father sitting her down and having this lengthy talk about how he wouldn't want her to give up the family name, but of course, she had blindly rejected it because she wanted to be committed to her husband. Chapter 12, Unleashed Potential. I'm joining the family tradition, Daddy, Evelyn said softly. I think it's time I finally came home. Her parents turned and looked at each other, shocked expressions on their faces. Her father smiled broadly and turned to Evelyn. He pulled her into a bone-crushing hug, laughing heartily and patting her back hard. My daughter has come back to her senses, he exclaimed, his deep voice booming through the house. Evelyn couldn't help but laugh, tears filling her eyes as she hugged her father back tightly, exhaling deeply. I'm home, Daddy, I'm finally home, she said, tears rolling down her cheeks and staining his shoulder. Oh my darling, her mother joined the embrace. Welcome home, my darling. Evelyn didn't know how long they stayed in the embrace, but by the time she pulled away, she felt a certain calmness wash over her. And with the calm came tiredness. She struggled to keep her eyes open, rubbing sleep out of them. Come, I'll show you your room, her mother said. It's just the same as you left it. Evelyn smiled tiredly. Thank you, Mama. And we start your training tomorrow morning, her father said, excitement in his tone. Yes, Daddy, Evelyn said with a small bow. Please forgive me, I'm very exhausted and I must rest. He patted her shoulder, love and tenderness in his eyes, making her feel warm. He didn't judge her, instead, he made her know that she made a few questionable choices. Get some rest, child, he said. Her mother led her to her old room, decorated in pink, her favorite color when she was younger. Evelyn collapsed on the bed before she even had the chance to take off her clothes. Without wasting any time, her father made arrangements for her to go to medical school. Already having a pre-med degree from Harvard University, she was easily accepted. Even though it had been 5 years since she abandoned her dreams of being a surgeon for her marriage, it was easy for her to immerse herself back into her studies. She was reminded that she actually enjoyed studying medicine, and for a moment she thought it was stupid to abandon her dreams for so long while he continued to chase his. A few weeks after she began her studies again, Evelyn noticed some changes in her body. At first, she attributed it to the stress of being thrust into medical life again. But as time went by, it became more and more serious. She would be tired all the time, and she always felt sick. The sight of her favorite food made her throw up. Fed up with the symptoms, she ran a test on herself one day after classes. To her surprise, she was pregnant. Evelyn had so many thoughts running through her mind. She remembered the last intimate session she had with Caleb, that must have been when she took in. She recalled not taking the pill. Should I tell him? She pondered to herself. But she quickly remembered how he told her to take the pill, a clear indicator that he didn't want a child. I won't do that. I'm raising this baby myself. She broke the news to her parents. While they were shocked, they accepted her decision to raise her children herself. Maybe they'll even grow up and follow the family tradition, her father said. It's too early to decide that, Daddy, Evelyn said, touching her stomach. Anything you and the kids ever need, her father said. We will provide it. I can't believe I'm going to be a grandpa. Evelyn continued her studies till her pregnancy could no longer let her. The months flew by quickly, and before she knew it, she was in labor. She gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl, Lance and Milena. 4 years later, Evelyn walked into the hospital, a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. She spotted her father waiting for her and pushed the phone into her lab coat pocket. Good morning, Mr. Director, she said with a soft smile, opting to call him by his position. His face looked grave, and he didn't smile back. We have an emergency, he said, his tone heavy. Evelyn stopped smiling. Let's go, she said and hurried off. Not here, doctor, her father said, making her pause and turn to face him. Let's go to my office. Evelyn nodded and followed him as he walked briskly. It had been 4 long years. Evelyn finally achieved her dream of being a doctor while also being a mother to her children. Her father employed her in one of his hospitals in their hometown, where she was doing her residency as a neurosurgeon. They got to his office and he closed the door and shut the blinds, facing her gravely. I don't know how you'll take this, he said softly, but you need to leave town for a while. Evelyn frowned. What's the matter? Talk to me, Daddy. Caleb's father needs surgery urgently and the doctors in the city hospital are unavailable. There's no one free for miles. They reached out to us as a last resort. It's a matter of life and death. Evelyn's heart skipped a beat. Caleb's father, sick, and she was the one going to be his doctor. Evelyn didn't like how her heart dipped. She had done everything in her power to push Caleb to the back of her mind and not think about him for these past years. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice firm. You'll have to operate on him. That would mean going back, Evelyn said, memories suddenly filling her mind. Yes, unfortunately, her father said, I'm really sorry, my dear, to put you into this situation. But we are doctors, saving lives comes first always. What do you say? Evelyn chewed her inner cheek. She didn't know what to say, her emotions raging inside her. Eventually, she came to a decision. Well, Chapter 13, Not Your Barbie Girl. Well, Evelyn started to say. Evelyn, please, her father cut in. You just have to operate on the man and then you come home. Like nothing ever happened. Evelyn smiled softly. I get it, and yes, I'll do it. He exhaled a sigh of relief. Thank goodness. I'll make arrangements for a hotel you can stay in, close to the hospital. Your mother and I can take care of the kids. No, Evelyn said. It's fine, I'll take the kids with me. Her father raised a brow. Is that a good idea? It's only a few days, she said with a smile. It's not long. Very well, her father said. Logan will drive you. Logan was one of her father's drivers. Logan picked Evelyn up from the hospital and they drove home to pick up the twins. Evelyn had her thoughts all over the place. Caleb's father was kind to her and she saw his as a father figure to her. It didn't seem right to her to just ignore him because of her past with Caleb. Mommy, where are we going? Milena asked in her sweet voice. Evelyn smiled at her. Milena's deep blue-green eyes reminded her of Caleb's eyes, and for a moment her heart ached. Out of town for a few days, Evelyn said. Do you have more sick people to take care of? Lance asked, raising his head from the book he was reading. Lance's beard striking resemblance to Evelyn. Yes, Evelyn said, but we'll be back soon. They got to the hotel her father booked for her. After settling her kids down and giving them instructions on what to do, Evelyn headed to the hospital. She could feel her heart pumping in anticipation. At the reception, a nurse recognized her and raced up to her. Dr. Evelyn, the nurse said, her voice sounding relieved. You're here? Yes, please lead me to his room right away. This way, doctor. Being called doctor, Evelyn could never truly get used to it. The nurse took her to the private wards. They got into his room. The man was lying on the bed, looking frail and hooked up to various machines. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. Flowers were placed all around, filling the air with a sweet, subtle scent. The man noticed Evelyn and turned his head slowly. Malcolm, Evelyn said softly and held his hand. I never thought I'd see you this way. My goodness, Malcolm exclaimed. Evelyn. Evelyn nodded with a smile. It's me. It's been so long, he said with a laugh. He motioned to the nurse. Evelyn cranked the bed up so that he was sitting comfortably. How have you been? Evelyn smiled sadly. I'm doing fine, a whole lot better than before. Oh my dear child, I have missed you every single day. You have no idea. She laughed heartily. I thought about you and imagined my surprise to learn that you fell ill. What are you doing here? You came to visit. Evelyn shook her head. No, I'm your doctor. I'll be operating on you. His eyes widened. Really? You're now a doctor? Yes. And I. Evelyn didn't get to finish. The door burst open, prompting her to turn to the sound. Father, what exactly is going on? A familiar voice started to say, then paused. Evelyn. Evelyn stared at Caleb. He walked into the hospital room holding a bag of food in his hand. His jaw dropped as he stared at Evelyn, then his father, then the nurse. Suddenly his eyes hardened and he glared at Evelyn. What are you doing here? Get out this instant. He spat coldly. Evelyn noticed he had changed. There was a certain coldness about him she couldn't place her finger on. He looked like a shadow of himself, the light in his eyes was gone. His hair has grown longer and his face was sharper, sterner, more cold. Son, Malcolm said, breaking the silence. Evelyn is the doctor in charge of my treatment now. Caleb scoffed. What? He said. Her, a doctor. In charge of you? Yes, Malcolm said. Show her some respect. That's not going to happen. Caleb shot back. He turned to the nurse. I demand another doctor. I will not allow this unskilled woman to touch my father, much less handle his treatment. Excuse me, Evelyn said, tired of keeping quiet. She got to her feet and faced Caleb. What was that you said? You heard me. he said, raising his chin in a show of superiority. Unskilled. You really believe I'm that same sad and naive wife who shuddered at your every word 4 years ago? Do you think I'm that same woman you can speak to however you please? Do you have a medical degree? Can you open a human skull? Can you even administer a shot of anesthesia? What makes you think you're in a position to question my skill as a doctor? Watch your tone, Evelyn, Caleb said coldly. No, you should watch your tone. Evelyn snapped back. And it's Dr. Evelyn to you. Doctor, the nurse said worriedly. I had to hurry down from my hospital, down here, suffering inconveniences so I can treat your father, and the last thing I need right now is your blatant stupidity. A simple thank you would have been in order. Evelyn, Malcolm said, trying to defuse the situation. You don't want me to treat your father. Fine, Evelyn said and turned to the door. She paused and turned back, staring at his shocked face. You'd have to plead on your knees before I reconsider. She left the room and closed the door behind her. What was that about? Caleb scoffed. He placed the bag of food on the bedside table. He notices his father glaring hotly at him. What? He snapped. You will apologize to her for disrespecting her position. No way am I doing that. Caleb said plainly. Nurse, send another doctor. I can't do that, sir. The nurse said. What do you mean? Caleb said, transferring his glare to her. Dr. Evelyn is the only doctor for Miles who is available at this moment. We have a shortage of doctors, we had to loan her from the next town. Caleb deadpanned. You have to be kidding. Mere consideration. Evelyn walked through the halls, reminding herself to calm down and not let her fury show. She couldn't believe this. On her first day in this new place, Caleb decides to show up and ruin her mood. After her father had pleaded with her, something he rarely ever did, to treat Malcolm. But no, Caleb had to ruin it with her stupidity. Dr. Evelyn. Doctor. Evelyn blinked and turned to see a nurse racing up to her. Yes, she said, trying not to transfer her aggression to the innocent nurse. I'm so sorry, doctor, you can't be here. I'm going to see the director. Evelyn stared simply and continued walking. The nurse raced up to her. Doctor, she cried, desperation in her voice. Evelyn got to the director's office and nodded politely. Come in, the deep voice on the other side said. Evelyn turned to the nurse. You may leave now, she said and walked inside the office. Ah, Miss Palmer, the director, John Deere said. John was a longtime friend of her father, they went to school together and both became doctors. Evelyn smiled softly at John. Hello, Mr. Deere, Evelyn said. John frowned, noticing her tight smile. What is the matter? Evelyn sighed and rubbed her temples. I quit, she said. John frowned even more. What is the matter? Did we do anything wrong? No, not you. Evelyn sighed. She recounted the entire experience with Caleb to the director. I'm taking the next available flight home. I will not deal with stupid entitled miscreants who have no respect at all. Director John, a voice called from the door. Speak of the devil, Evelyn hissed under her breath. Caleb stormed into the director's office, his gaze focused on the director and completely ignoring her. Mr. Winthrop, John said. To what do I? Is this the best you can do? Caleb snapped, cutting the director off. Whatever do you mean, Mr. Winthrop? I demand a change of doctors. Caleb said simply. I will not accept that Evelyn or whoever her name is to administer treatment to my father. In case you have forgotten, I have the right to choose who administers treatment to my own father. Evelyn raised a dark red brow. She couldn't believe that he was talking as if she wasn't even in the room. She folded her arms and stared at him, wondering why on earth she had put up with this kind of person for 5 years of her life. Mr. Winthrop, please calm down. Do not tell me to calm down. You claim you are the best hospital in town and you call in an unskilled, incompetent doctor. You are even more incompetent than her. Mr. Dear sir, Evelyn said sweetly, directing her smile at John. He turned to her, an apologetic look in her eyes. I'm so sorry, my dear, he said. I will resolve this, I promise you. I understand your anger and I will fix this. Evelyn shook her head. It's fine. I'm heading home now. Do have a wonderful day. Evil. Before John could finish his statement, she walked out of the door. John sighed heavily and faced Caleb. He couldn't believe that the famed first son of the Winthrops was acting in such a distasteful manner. In all the years John had known Evelyn, she was the best at whatever she set her mind to do. She had excelled in school, above the best. John himself had been very bothered when she had given up her dreams to get married. But now that she has returned, she had shown them just who was the best again. Well, Caleb snapped in annoyance. You have to calm down, Mr. Winthrop, John said calmly. When is the new doctor coming in? The new doctor just threatened to leave, John said. I tried to explain to you, your father's condition is very very rare, and the only doctor who has been able to successfully carry out that operation is Evelyn Palmer. Caleb pretended to be unfazed by the news, but his heart skipped a beat. This was his worst nightmare. So we had to fly Dr. Palmer in as soon as we could. She is a very busy doctor, and honestly, I was very surprised when she accepted to come over here. She is not just a doctor, she is the best shot we have at making sure your father lives. What do you mean? Your father has a few days to live if this operation isn't carried out immediately. It was either flying her in or flying your father out to her hospital, and I'm sure you know how difficult that could be. Caleb raised a brow. So you're saying you can't get another doctor to treat my father? No, John said simply. And our best doctor just walked out. She could very well be at the airport by now. Caleb felt a bolt of fear for his father's life. He refused to believe that Evelyn, the Evelyn he had known, would turn out to be the last lifeline for his father. Caleb didn't want his father to die, but at the same time he wanted nothing to do with Evelyn. Not after all that had gone down between them. I'll be back soon, Caleb said, and without waiting for a response from the director left the office. Caleb rushed out of the hospital and into the open. He looked around, searching for Evelyn around. A car drove past in front of him. From the window he saw a flash of red hair. Evelyn. Caleb rushed to his car and started the engine. He swerved out of the parking lot and raced after Evelyn. He felt his pride bruised and wounded inside him, but he reminded himself that this was for his father. If anything happened to his father, he wouldn't be able to forgive himself. That damn woman. He hissed and hit the steering wheel. Chapter 15, striking a devil's deal. Evelyn ran her fingers through her long hair while keeping one hand steady on the steering wheel. She bit her lip so hard she almost tasted blood. Her frustration and anger at Caleb was through the roof. All she wanted to do was turn the car around and slap him across the face. Deep down it pained her that she was doing this because she really had a soft spot for Malcolm. But Caleb was the cause of it all. Evelyn spotted her destination appearing up ahead, and a small smile graced her lips. It was a flower house that sometimes served as her quiet thinking place. Evelyn packed her car and got out. The heady smell of flowers hit her hard, and somehow she found it calming. She spotted the owner of the flower house up ahead. Evelyn walked up to her. "Miss Rose," Evelyn said, calling the attention of the elderly woman. "Evelyn," Rose exclaimed, a smile on her wrinkled face. Come in, come in. How are you today?" Evelyn asked. "Are the flowers?" The loud sound of a car screeching to a halt made her pause. Evelyn turned sharply to see a black Lamborghini skidding to a stop in front of the garden. The driver's door opened and Caleb stepped out. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "Evelyn," Caleb shouted. "What's that?" Evelyn clapped back. Caleb walked up to her, staring deep into her eyes. "What are you doing? Why are you following this unskilled doctor around?" Evelyn said darkly. "I thought you got a more qualified doctor, didn't you?" Caleb sighed heavily. "That's not, I'll leave you two alone now," Rose said and patted Evelyn's arm. "Miss Rose," Evelyn said, "I'll be with you shortly." The woman nodded and left to tend to flowers on the other side. RPM. Evelyn turned and faced Caleb fully. She folded her arms, a stern look on her face. "What do you want?" she asked. Caleb looked at her. Something was very different about her, and he hadn't noticed it at the hospital because one was too busy sabotaging his father's chances of survival. She looked harder, but somehow it even made her look even more stunning. Her long red hair had come undone and flowed behind her, like a curtain of fire. Her eyes that once held love for him stared at him with boredness and contempt. She still wore her lab coat, and he never thought seeing her in that would look so perfect. "You've changed," Caleb said, pushing his thoughts away. "So have you," she replied. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you back then," Caleb said. "I should have shown you more respect given your position now." Evelyn didn't reply. She stared at him. It felt like she was seeing him for the first time. Maybe it was the afternoon sun through the glass ceiling of the garden, or maybe it was the flowers and butterflies. Her heart skipped. Once upon a time, she had been madly in love with this man. "I told you you'd have to kneel and apologize," she said at last, focusing her gaze on his eyes. "Seriously," he said. She raised her chin up. "Maybe you're not ready," she said and turned to leave. "Wait," Caleb called out. She turned to him. He looked very embarrassed. "If it's what you want, then fine. I'll do it," he said and started to go on his knees. "Stop," Evelyn said. She cleared her throat and straightened her back. "I am a doctor. I took an oath that I cannot break." "Evelyn, don't call my name like that." "I'm sorry." "Anyway," Evelyn announced. This time, we'll have to do this on my own rules. Caleb sighed heavily. What are your terms? I'll send them over to you later. For now, I need my peace. Caleb stared at her. This wasn't the Evelyn he knew. What exactly had happened in the years they had been apart? Very well, he replied. I'll leave you alone for now. She didn't reply. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the deeper part of the garden. Caleb wondered if he should go after her, but then he wasn't sure what he would even say to her. She had made it clear where they stood. She was a doctor and he was, well, him. Caleb turned and left the garden with the scent of its assorted flowers. He felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. His father would live, and he would be fine too. He couldn't believe he had nearly put his father in mortal danger because of his pride. Caleb drove back to the hospital where his father was waiting for him, a displeased look on his face. Did you apologize for your actions? Malcolm Winthrop asked. Caleb knew his father always had a soft spot for Evelyn, even in the days of their marriage. She'll be sending over a contract soon. For the terms of the treatment, Caleb explained. Malcolm sighed. Very well. He laid back on his bed. I can't believe you let her go. He grumbled under his breath. Caleb heard him but pretended he didn't. Evelyn sighed, her head raised up to the ceiling. String of pearls grew from the ceiling, draping down to the floor. They looked beautiful, like tiny pearls like leaves. She glanced down at the herbal tea that Rose had prepared for her, a long tradition they had for a while. She had agreed to the surgery, all she had to do was draw up the agreement and send it over. Evelyn took her phone out and dialed Ashley. She picked on the second ring. Shouldn't you be saving someone's life right now? Ashley asked. Evelyn laughed softly. You won't believe what just happened now. What happened? Tell me. Shouldn't you be at work now, PM? Oh please, so are you. Ashley laughed. Come on, have you met a very handsome Mr. Somebody? Evelyn shook her head. It's more than that. She told Ashley all that had happened with Caleb and Malcolm. You're kidding, right? Ashley said, trying to control her laughter. She failed and burst out laughing. Evelyn joined her. It was better to laugh about things than to cry about a teen. Dirty games. Caleb got back to his penthouse and headed up straight to his room, ignoring Aurelia, who was waiting for his return in the living room. He felt disjointed inside him, and he couldn't place why he was feeling how he was feeling. Seeing Evelyn after so long had done something to him that he couldn't place. And even worse, seeing her as his father's doctor. He simply wasn't ready for that. He undid his tie and sighed, running his fingers through his hair. He noted it was growing longer now. He remembered once during their marriage that Evelyn had told him she liked his hair longer, saying it resembled black ink. He had cut it the next day. Darling. A soft, sweet voice came from the door. Caleb didn't need to turn to know it was Aurelia. She came up behind him and put her hands around his waist. What's the matter? She asked, her soft body pressing up against him. She wore a flimsy nightdress and he could feel there was nothing else underneath. On a normal day he would have ravaged her right there. I saw Evelyn today, Caleb said. Aurelia gasped. What? She said, the softness gone from her voice. What did she want? Caleb sighed. Keep your voice down, I have a headache. I'm sorry my love, she said and kissed his back. What did she want? She asked in a more quiet tone. Nothing, Caleb said and held Aurelia's hand. He slowly removed her hands from his body and turned to face her. She's my father's doctor. Aurelia looked stunned for 2 seconds then started to laugh. You're joking, right? Do I look like it? No. There was a period of silence. How is she a doctor? That dumb Evelyn. She doesn't have it in her. Well, she is not just a doctor but the best one for some reason, Caleb said and sighed. He rubbed his temples feeling his headache multiply. This is all so exhausting. Aurelia bit her lower lip, her mind lost in thought. This was bad, this was really bad. That Evelyn woman was back and being Malcolm's doctor, that means that she would be seeing Caleb every day. Aurelia glacéed at Caleb and felt her heart swell with love for him. She had loved him. She had always loved him, even when he was married to that Evelyn woman. Aurelia couldn't deny her happiness and joy when Evelyn finally divorced Caleb. That meant that she could now have her love back all to herself this time. And for 4 beautiful years he has been hers alone. But now Evelyn was back. And she could ruin everything. Aurelia smiled softly. She reached out and cupped his face in her hands. His blue eyes stared into hers. She couldn't read any emotions in his eyes at all. Don't worry my love, Aurelia said. It's just for the duration of the treatment, isn't it? Caleb took a hold of her hands to pull her off but she held still. Yes. Don't spend your energy worrying about her, focus on me instead. Caleb's eyes searched her face, pausing at her lips and slowly moving down her body. Aurelia smiled. He was starting to crack. After all, she had worn this particular see-through nightdress for a reason. Get on the bed and wait for me, Caleb said, pushing her hands away from his face. His eyes turned dark and hazy with lust. Aurelia smiled triumphantly to herself. She bets that Evelyn can't have this effect on him. If Evelyn could, then Caleb wouldn't have come to Aurelia anyway. Yes, my love, Aurelia replied with a sultry smile. Congratulations, Dr. Palmer. Once again you proved to us just how lucky we are to have you with us. Evelyn smiled shyly as she took off her nose mask and gloves. It's nothing, Director. I am simply doing my job. John laughed heartily. And so humble. We are truly blessed to have you with us. Thank you, Director. Evelyn replied. Have a good night. Okay, John said, waving to her and walking away. I'll try, Evelyn said with a sigh. Evelyn wanted to soak in a hot bath for 2 hours. The day started as normal for her, with a few things to get done, one of which included getting Malcolm ready for his surgery and drafting the terms of agreement for Caleb. An emergency had come in, and she had to perform surgery on a young boy. The surgery lasted 10 long hours but was successful. Evelyn was tired to her bones as she headed out of the operating room. She stretched her shoulders and popped her neck. Dr. Palmer, here are the vitals of Lucas, a nurse said as she walked up to Evelyn. Lucas was the boy she had just operated on. Evelyn took the clipboard and looked at it. The figures were normal, and she heaved a sigh of relief. Well, make sure that you, Evelyn, a voice boomed through the hall, cutting Evelyn off. She raised her head to see Aurelia storming up to her, her blonde hair flying behind her. Evelyn deadpanned. The last thing she needed was this right now. Get your phone out. When I signal, record, Evelyn whispered to the nurse as Aurelia got closer. Should I call security? No. Aurelia stormed up to Evelyn and stood in her face. Evelyn glared down at her, using their height difference to her advantage. This is a hospital, Aurelia, Evelyn said darkly. Keep your damn voice low. Aurelia scoffed. You think you're so smart now you're a doctor, huh? Playing dirty games to get my men? Your man is my leftover, Evelyn said calmly. You should be ashamed of yourself. Aurelia gasped, her eyes widening in shock. If you're smart, you'll get yourself someone else. You will be better off without him. You damn bitch. Aurelia screamed and grabbed Evelyn by the hair. Her hairnet fell off and her long red hair spilled out. Aurelia grabbed her locks and pulled hard. Evelyn met the nurse's eyes and nodded. The nurse signaled to her phone that had been up a while. Evelyn smiled in content. They would never know what hit them. Teen, I've got new rules. Caleb rushed into his father's hospital, his heart racing wildly in his chest. He had just gotten a text from the hospital to come to the hospital immediately. Father, he called out as he burst into the room, his eyes wide with horror. The sight he met made him pause and backtrack. There was Evelyn talking with his father. They were laughing easily like old friends. Caleb frowned. What is going on here? He asked, his gaze pointedly on Evelyn. What does it look like? His father said. Caleb sighed and ran his hands through his hair. Do you have any idea how fast I rushed over here because I got a call? What? You thought I had died? Malcolm said. Yes, Caleb exclaimed. But you're so clearly fine, right? Not by a long shot, Evelyn said and rose to her feet. I asked the hospital to call you over because I knew that if I did you wouldn't show up. Caleb glared hotly at her. What exactly do you want? My first rule if you want this to work is this, Evelyn said with an air of authority. Aurelia must be banned from ever stepping foot in this hospital. Caleb was taken aback. What are you talking about? Evelyn took her phone out of her lab coat pocket and showed it to him. There was a video of Aurelia pulling Evelyn's hair playing. In the video Aurelia kept calling Evelyn names and hitting her. Evelyn put the phone away, a dark look in her eyes. She should consider herself lucky I didn't report this to the authorities. She would be facing much more than just being banned from this hospital. Caleb couldn't believe what he had just witnessed. Aurelia had assaulted Evelyn. What was going through her head exactly? I'll handle it, Caleb said with a sigh. What are your other rules? I will send them over when I am done, Evelyn said simply. You can't possibly be serious, Evelyn, Caleb said, a hint of anger in his voice. Evelyn raised her brow. Whatever do you mean? Caleb felt anger and frustration spark inside him. No one ever spoke to him this way. No one. Evelyn was seriously getting on his nerves in the worst ways possible. Now you're just being haughty, he said with annoyance. She laughed. Haughty? I believe the word you're looking for is merciful. If I wanted to be haughty, your little girlfriend will be in jail by now. Caleb glanced at his father. The man was smiling, a pleased look on his face. See and please remember this. Evelyn said and stepped closer to him. They stood at the same height, so she was looking directly into his eyes. I'm granting you a favor, a very big favor. And I deserve every bit of respect from you because of it. Do well to remind your girlfriend of that. Very impressive, my dear. Malcolm said, his face grinning like ever before. Caleb rolled his eyes. You're citing her, he said to his father. But of course, this is the first time anyone is putting you in your place. Evelyn giggled shyly and turned to Malcolm. Oh please, I wasn't doing that. I'm just giving him a fair warning. Malcolm just laughed. Caleb felt anger burn inside him. Evelyn glanced at him, a small smile on her red lips. Have a pleasant day, she said and left. Father, what was all that about? Caleb asked Malcolm once Evelyn had left. You need to keep that Aurelia in check, Malcolm said very sternly, his eyes flashing a warning. She's not a dog to be kept in check. Then why is she acting like one? Caleb didn't have an answer. And Evelyn, I'll always remind you of how much of a fool you were to let her go. Just look at you now. Father, please, now is not the time. I always knew she had it in her to be feisty. Malcolm said, do as she says. I cannot have you putting my life in danger. Especially not because of that nobody you call Aurelia. I don't have time for this, Caleb said and headed to the door. He paused and turned to his father. Since you're obvious in good health, thanks to Almighty Evelyn, I am taking my leave. His father didn't reply. Caleb left the hospital room. His blood boiled with anger. He had never been so humiliated as he was today because of Evelyn. And this was all Aurelia's fault. He didn't know exactly who he was angry at. Was it Evelyn for not bowing to his every command, or was it Aurelia for acting like a teenage girl? Evelyn. There was a time Evelyn never spoke back to him, never went against his wishes. There was a time she did everything he asked her to do without complaint. This wasn't the Evelyn he knew. Not at all. Caleb drove home to find Aurelia waiting for him. What happened? You rushed off like that, Aurelia said and walked up to him. I got a call from the hospital. Oh my, is your father okay? Yes, he is. Is anything wrong with you? What do you mean? Why would you pick a fight with Evelyn? Aurelia rolled her eyes. Oh that. Do you have any idea what you've just done? Acting like a spoiled child and causing a tantrum at a hospital. Do you even know how you put my father in danger? Evelyn was going to. Stop it, Aurelia screamed. It's always about Evelyn, isn't it? Evelyn this, Evelyn that. You're picking her over me. Again. Are you daft? Can't you understand the situation at stake here? She's your ex-wife for crying out loud. Yet you're always talking about her. Aurelia started to sob. Is it so hard for you to choose me? Is it? Aurelia, you have lost your senses. Caleb said. Get out of my house. What? I said get out. And do not return here till you get your senses back. Mundane love. Caleb heard the door slam, signaling that Aurelia had left. He had no idea where she was going to stay, probably the apartment he got for her or maybe with a friend. He didn't care at the moment. His mind was racing faster than he could stop it. So much had happened in a space of 2 days that he didn't even know how to keep them all straight. His life was going well, at least as well as it could. And then his father falls in. And in a twist of events, Evelyn is now his father's doctor. Caleb sighed heavily. Evelyn. He wasn't prepared for Evelyn showing up. She looked more radiant than he had ever seen before. And she had changed drastically. And then there was Aurelia, the one he picked over Evelyn. He convinced himself that he loved Aurelia and that was why he chose her. He convinced himself that Evelyn was like a baby sister to him. He didn't know what to believe again. Caleb wasn't one to bother about emotions. He didn't deal with mushy feelings and all of that. He went up to his room and took a cold shower, hoping it would calm him down. The shower didn't help at all. He tried to get some rest, hoping that things will get better in the morning. He laid in bed, tossing and turning throughout the night. Evelyn sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. Her children stared at her with big eyes, pleading with her to play with them. She has just returned from work, exhausted and wanting to get some rest. Darlings, I can't do that right now, she said calmly, managing a smile for her babies. But that was what you said last time, Milena said, a pout on her face. You're always busy, mommy, and you don't have time anymore. Evelyn felt her heart break. Doesn't Ava play with you? Ava was the help she had hired for her kids. That was the second help in a space of 2 days. We don't want her anymore, Lance said and folded his arms. We want you, mommy. Evelyn sighed and bit on her lip. She wondered what she was going to do. Her kids were used to spending time with her parents and they seemed to reject anyone else. Okay, my darlings, she said after a while. I'll see what I can do, okay. They nodded, big smiles on their faces. Thank you, Mommy. Evelyn felt her anxiety spike. She put her children to bed and tucked them in. The house became very quiet after they fell asleep. She went down to the living room, her phone in her hand as she contemplated what next to do. She called Ashley. Ashley picked on the second ring. It's really late, you know, Ashley said with a tired yawn. Is anything the problem? It's the kids, Evelyn said with a sigh. They want me at home and they keep rejecting the helps I get for them. Ashley sighed softly. Considering I brought the last help, I feel very victimized right now. Evelyn rolled her eyes. Really? Ashley laughed softly. Not exactly. Okay, I'll come over tomorrow, okay, we can work on this together. Evelyn heaved a sigh of relief. Thank you so much, Ash. Whatever. Go to bed now. Evelyn felt her spirits gradually quieten. Everything will be alright soon enough. The next day, which was a Sunday, Ashley arrived with some prospective helps. The kids have to choose for themselves. She explained and gestured to the 4 helps. Maybe this time it'll help you out. Alright, Evelyn agreed. The interviews started. Lance and Milena conducted themselves like adults, asking questions that Evelyn never expected. It dawned on her that they wanted someone older, like her mother. By the time the interview was over, they had both decided on an elderly woman named Nina PM. Good day, Nina, Evelyn said after the interview was over. My kids seems to have a liking for you. Nina smiled, her wrinkled face brightening up. They're very respectful and well-mannered children. You did a wonderful job. Evelyn smiled shyly. Oh, it's a collective effort. Anyway, I need you to get familiar with them. They may be twins, but I assure you that they are very different from each other. Nina nodded. Of course. Shall we begin? Evelyn took time to explain to Nina how Lance and Milena liked their food, the beds, and every idiosyncratic request they had. The kids were bright and would need help with their schoolwork. Thankfully, Nina was up to the task. By the time the orientation was done, it was late. Ashley helped Evelyn prepare dinner. The kids ate and soon went to bed, leaving Evelyn and Ashley alone. How is it going up there? Ashley asked as they relaxed over a glass of wine. Evelyn told her the story of how Aurelia showed up at the hospital and caused a scene. I can't believe how shameless they are, Ashley said distastefully. Did you put them in their places? Of course, Evelyn said with a laugh. Who did you think I was? I'm gonna let them walk all over me again, never. You could have refused the offer though. No. Malcolm is very dear to me, and I cannot just ignore him. Ashley rolled her eyes. Yeah, right. They talked late into the night, catching up with each other's lived and making small talk. They left the living room and went to Evelyn's bedroom. Stay the night, okay? Evelyn said to Ashley. Of course. It's late. Do you want me to get killed out there? Ashley said, already taking off her clothes and heading for the shower. Are you coming? No. Evelyn laughed. We're not kids anymore. Whatever. They went to bed together, Evelyn smiling to herself. Perhaps things weren't so bad after all. She had her life, her children, and her best friend. As she drifted to sleep, she couldn't help but think about Caleb and his beautiful eyes. Memories of their time together flooded her mind, and with them came a crippling sense of sadness. Teen, 2 choices. Evelyn sighted a familiar head of blonde waves. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the ward the woman had just come out from. Aurelia. Evelyn called out, making her way over to Caleb's mistress. Aurelia turned, a surprised look on her face which quickly morphed into one of disgust. Oh, it's you, she said. What do you want? Evelyn couldn't believe the guts on this woman. Where did you just come out from? I came to see my father-in-law, Aurelia said with a shrug. Evelyn gasped. You did what? No one was allowed to see Malcolm. Not even a nurse. Evelyn had prohibited anyone from going in as these were the very crucial moments before his operation. She didn't want any form of complications as the man's immune system was failing already. How did you get in there? Do you have any idea how much danger you could have put him in? Relax, please, Aurelia said with an eye roll. It's not like I'm doing anything, I just went in to see him. And who issued you a pass to do that? Aurelia glared at her. Look, you have no right to tell me where I need to go or not. You're not my mother, and honestly you're getting really annoying. Evelyn suppressed the urge to slap Aurelia across her face. Was this who Caleb had chosen over her? This dumb bitch. I see now how truly stupid you are, Evelyn said, sneering at Aurelia like she was the scum of the earth. Tell that stupidity elsewhere and do not even dare to mingle it into someone's life. This is a matter of life and death and you waltz in here thinking it's some kind of show. Aurelia gasped loudly. Stupid. Just because you. What is going on here? Evelyn turned to see Caleb walking in. Aurelia instantly sighted him and ran over to him, grabbing his arm and making what was supposed to be a cute face. PM, darling. This woman won't let me go in and see Dad. Aurelia whined in a high-pitched voice. Evelyn nearly gagged. She turned her gaze to Caleb and her eyes hardened. Mr. Winthrop, she said, her voice cold. It seems you do not agree to my terms, do you? Caleb frowned. I never said that. I remember telling you that rule number is you keeping your baggage out of this hospital if you want us to work together. Evelyn said, flashing Aurelia a disgust-filled look. Yes, you did say that. Caleb said. Then do explain to me what she is doing here waltzing around my patient's ward. Watch your mouth, bitch. Aurelia shouted at Evelyn. No, you watch your mouth. Caleb shunned her. He shook her off him and glared at her. What exactly is your problem? Is it so difficult for you to take simple instructions? Aurelia frowned. Why are you siding her? I'm not. But you are. Every time. You always side her. It's always Evelyn. It has always been Evelyn. Aurelia, Caleb said. Don't Aurelia me. You want her back, don't you? That's why you're running after her like an obedient puppy. Evelyn watched the spectacle, an amused look on her face. My father's life is at stake here. Caleb shouted, silencing Aurelia. And she is the only one who can help me. So please do forgive if I do not share your lack of regard for my father's life, but as much as I would love to continue watching you two teat each other apart, Evelyn spoke up in a loud voice, making both Caleb and Aurelia turn to her. I have patients to see to. Please take this talk of yours outside. The hospital isn't a fancy ground for such nonsense. You damn bitch. Who the fuck do you think you are? Aurelia screamed and stormed up to Evelyn. She tried to grab her hair, but Evelyn was quicker, grabbing her hand and twisting it at an odd angle. Aurelia cried out in pain, hitting Evelyn's hand and trying to get her off. Let go of me, you crazy bitch. PM, Evelyn, please stop. Caleb said. Shut up, Caleb. Evelyn snapped at him. She released Aurelia and threw her towards Caleb. He caught her, staring at Evelyn with unreadable eyes. One more word from you and it's jail, Evelyn said, throwing her coldest look at Aurelia. She turned to Caleb and said, have a day you deserve. She turned and walked away. I can't believe you. Aurelia screamed at Caleb. She pulled herself away from him and glared at him. You couldn't even do anything to help me. You still love her, don't you? Caleb sighed. He turned and started walking down the hall. Aurelia raced after him. Caleb, I didn't love her, I never did. Caleb said quietly. He found that he couldn't even believe his words. Oh really? Aurelia scoffed. Liar. Caleb glared at her, but she was looking away. He felt very conflicted inside him. Evelyn or Aurelia? He didn't want to be forced to choose. Not for any reason. Evelyn was in his past now. She was the wife he didn't want. He was with Aurelia now, the one he wanted. But why did it feel so wrong to him? Wow bro, your life is just like a movie. Caleb glared hotly at Lucas. Oh yeah, you have no idea how exhausting it is. Yeah, it must be really exhausting having to choose between two very sexy women. Mason said with an eye roll. Caleb drank more of his alcohol. He had just finished recounting his experiences to his friends, and to his surprise they laughed at him. You divorced Evelyn, didn't you? Mason asked, pouring him more alcohol. Why are you crying now? I'm not crying. Caleb grumbled. It's just PM, she's better now, and it hurts you. Lucas said, finishing the sentence. Not exactly. Caleb said and sighed. He gulped down his shot of whiskey and asked for more. Perhaps this season isn't exactly yours. Mason said and patted his back. We're always here for the full gist. Caleb punched him in the gut. He burst out laughing. Soon Lucas joined him. Caleb rolled his eyes and went back to his drink. Imbeciles, he said under his breath. King of imbeciles. They taunted back. Evelyn's personal line rang. She took out her phone, pausing the work she was doing. Only very few people had her personal line and could use it in emergencies. Seeing Nina's name displayed made her heart skip a beat. The kids. What is the problem? She said immediately after picking up the phone. Miss, please, I don't know what's wrong with the kids. Evelyn rose to her feet in a start. What happened? Are my children okay? Evelyn said, already packing up her things, fearing the worst. They won't eat or talk to me. Ever since I picked them up from school, they've been really quiet. I think something upset them at school. I'm really worried, miss. Evelyn's heart started to race. Had her kids been bullied? What was going on? She put her phone into her handbag and quickly took off her lab coat, hanging it on the coat hanger. She rushed out of her office and headed down to the lobby. After informing the receptionist of her whereabouts, she rushed to the parking lot and got into her car. As she drove home, her mind raced with all the possibilities of what could have happened to make her normally very cheerful kids turn cold all of a sudden. She got home and rushed inside. "Nina," she called out. "Miss, thank goodness you're home," Nina said gratefully and walked up to her. Evelyn saw her kids in the living room. Both of them were engrossed in books, flipping the pages silently and refusing to acknowledge her presence. Normally they would have run up to her and hugged her, eager to tell her about their day at school and all they had learned. "Thank you, Nina," Evelyn said and smiled at the help. "I'll take it from here, okay?" Nina nodded. She glanced at the kids worriedly. "Have a wonderful night, miss." Evelyn walked up to her kids and sat on the floor with them. "Lance?" she called her son. "Yes, mommy," Lance replied calmly. "Milena," she called her daughter. She looked at her briefly, her face stern. "What happened?" Evelyn asked. "Nothing at all," they said in unison. Evelyn sighed. "Tell me the problem, okay? Mommy can fix it." "What happened?" "Nothing happened." "I know something did," Evelyn said softly. At school, the kids were silent. Then they looked at each other, communicating with their eyes. "We want our daddy," Lance said. "Other kids all have a mommy and a daddy. We want our daddy too." Evelyn felt her heart skip. The kids had never asked for their father before. Other kids said it's weird we don't have a daddy, Milena said. "And we agree with them." Evelyn's heart broke. How could she explain the circumstances of their birth to them? There was no way she wanted to put her kids through such pain. "Your daddy he's in another city," Evelyn said. Their eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes," Evelyn said and smiled sadly. "Very soon, he'll come home and you'll see him." Finally, they exclaimed and hugged each other. "We'll have our own daddy too." Evelyn nodded and joined in the hug. "Yes, you will." After the issue was resolved, the kids agreed to eat their dinner. Soon they were fast asleep. Evelyn slumped on the couch, her heart bleeding. She knew at the back of her mind that the kids will one day ask for their father, but she thought that day was still very far off. She took out her phone and called the school. "Miss Palmer, good evening," the woman at the desk said. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "My children were bullied today for not having a father." "Is that right?" "Oh, of course not." The woman stuttered. "We'll look into it immediately." "Thank you," Evelyn said and ended the call, her annoyance beginning to show. This was all Caleb's fault. The next day at work, she personally dropped her children off at school. "No one will dare bully you again," she said as she gave them warm hugs. "Okay," they said in unison. Sometimes Evelyn wondered if they shared one mind. Their answers sounded rehearsed at times. She smiled warmly at them. "Don't worry about your daddy, okay? Have a nice day at work, Mommy," Lance said. "Bye," Milena sang. Evelyn waved and watched them head inside the school. She got into her car and drove off, heading for the hospital. She had received a report the previous night of Malcolm's health. He was improving at an impressive speed, meaning the operation was going to go smoothly. Her car suddenly started making a strange noise. She parked by the roadside and got out. She saw nothing out of the ordinary, but trying to restart the car proved difficult. "You've got to be kidding me," she exclaimed, looking around her as if an answer would manifest somehow. A black Venza pulled up beside her. The tinted window rolled down. "Good evening, Dr. Palmer," a man greeted from inside. Evelyn frowned, confused at who was calling her. "Yes," she said tentatively. The door opened and the man stepped out. He was tall as her. He had honey brown eyes and light brown hair that caught the morning sun. He was very handsome, with a gentle face that could charm anyone. "You seem to be in a pickle," he said, looking at her car. "And you could end up being late." "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Evelyn asked. He laughed, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment. "I'm sorry. My name is Travis Sylvester. I recently transferred to the hospital. How do you know me?" "I saw you during my interview with Director John." Evelyn nodded. "Okay, can I give you a lift? Since we're going to the same place." Evelyn considered it for a while. Then she nodded. "Sure." Travis smiled, a smile that felt warm like a hug. Evelyn blinked her thoughts away. He held the door open for her to enter the car. Interesting, Evelyn thought to herself. Chapter 21, the closer Caleb got to his father's ward, the more he could make out the voice of Evelyn having a conversation with someone. "There was no way you let that happen," Evelyn said with a soft laugh. Caleb wondered what was making her laugh and just who she was talking to. He grabbed the doorknob, about to turn it open when he sighted who was inside. His blood ran cold. It was the new doctor who had recently been transferred to the hospital. Caleb didn't know his name, but he had been seeing the guy around. From what he deduced, the new doctor was taking care of Malcolm with Evelyn. Caleb hadn't bothered about him. That was until now. He was talking with Evelyn, holding her hands and looking at her with lustful eyes. And she was smiling at him, laughing without a care. Her smile made his heart freeze. In all the years he was married to her, he had never seen her smile like that. Something he couldn't name filled his heart. Unable to handle it anymore, Caleb burst into the ward. They turned to him, surprised looks on their faces. "What is going on here?" Caleb asked, his eyes traveling between Evelyn and the doctor. "What does it look like, Mr. Winthrop?" Evelyn asked, her smile disappearing as she shot him those cold and strict looks she had always flashed at him. "Mr. Winthrop," the doctor said. Caleb turned to him. "Yes," he said. "And you are?" "Travis Sylvester." "Travis, huh?" Caleb said, his voice angry. "This is my father's ward and not a place for your romance antics." "Romance?" Travis said and tilted his head to the side. "Whatever do you mean? You're asking me that?" Caleb exploded. "What do you think you're doing? Aren't you a doctor doing such rubbish on duty?" Travis looked taken aback. "Very well. I'm done here," he said. "Dr. Palmer," he said to Evelyn. He took her hand in his and smiled brightly. "Of course," Evelyn replied. Caleb nearly lost his mind. He wanted to punch the man in the face for even daring to touch Evelyn. Caleb's mind raced with the possibilities. How long had this been going on? Was there more to this? Why was Evelyn looking at him like that? And why was she holding his hand? Caleb suddenly had a mental image of Travis and Evelyn kissing and being intimate. Would he touch her the same way he had? Listen to her soft moans and feel her smooth skin. "Evelyn," Caleb said sharply. He reached out and grabbed Evelyn's arm. Travis paused and turned to him. Caleb ignored him, his gaze solely focused on Evelyn. She stared at his hand and his face. "What?" she asked coldly. "I need to talk to you," Caleb said. "Alone?" Travis shrugged his shoulders. He let go of Evelyn's hand. "I'll see you later, Dr. Palmer," he said with a smile at her. "Yes, later," Evelyn replied with a smile of hers. As Caleb glanced around, his brows furrowed, his lips pressed into a tight line. His eyes, normally bright with curiosity, dulled as they fixed on the scene before him. Shoulders slumped, he took a slow, heavy breath, a weight settling on his chest. Travis turned and left, leaving Caleb and Evelyn alone. "Yes," Evelyn snapped. "What do you want?" "We need to talk," Caleb said, his eyes strictly on her. "On with it then." Evelyn with her chin raised high, she folded her hands together. "Not here," Caleb said. He held her hand and led her out of the ward. She rolled her eyes but followed him. Evelyn couldn't understand why he was acting the way he was. She had a feeling, but she wasn't entirely sure. He dragged her hands, making her trail behind him as she cursed in between her breath. Scoffing, she'd tried to pull her hands away, but his holds on her tightened as he led her to a quiet place. The restroom. He locked the door behind them and turned to face her. "What was that back there?" he snapped, annoyance written all over his face. He pinned her to the wall, his eyes narrowed in anger. Evelyn clicked her teeth and raised a dark brow. "What exactly are you talking about? You were flirting with a man? Who the fuck is he?" "That's frankly none of your business, Mr. Winthrop," Evelyn said simply. "You have no right to ask me questions about my private life. You are the relative of my patient and that is all you are to me." Caleb was taken aback. For a while he had forgotten that Evelyn wasn't his wife anymore. He had lost the privilege to know about her private life. They were strangers now, yet the pain in his heart was undeniable. Evelyn stared at him, a laugh on the tip of her tongue. Was he jealous? He had absolutely no right to be. He hadn't chosen her, he had made it known she had no place in his life. And now he was angry. Was exactly was wrong with him? "Even if that's true," Caleb said, "you are a doctor. You should keep such things in private and not all in the ward. Have you no shame, showing your romance in the ward?" "That's enough from you," Evelyn snapped. "What makes you think you can tell me how to run my life? Or meddle into my business? Do we have some sort of connection?" "Evelyn," Caleb murmured. "Stop this. Whatever I do is none of your business, Mr. Winthrop. You do not get to question me whatsoever. Just as I don't get to question you." "Evelyn, it's Dr. Palmer to you," she hissed in anger. "And you will do well to address me as such." "How long is this going to go on for?" Caleb asked, gazing into her eyes softly. He remembered the times her eyes held such love and affection for him, especially as they had sex. The memories sent a thrill through his body. She was so beautiful. Her eyes held so much fury and anger for him now, and it wasn't helping his predicament. His eyes moved to her lips, looking tempting and soft. His hand moved slowly down to her waist and held her close to him. "Mr. Winthrop," she said, her voice wary. "Stop calling me that," he said softly. She stared at him, her eyes holding his gaze. Caleb became aware of how physically close they were. He could feel her warmth through her clothes. If he leaned in, he just might be able to. Chapter 22, No More Pain. Evelyn's eyes went wide as she noticed Caleb leaning into her face slowly. "Are you kidding me?" she pondered inside her. Just who did he think he was messing with? Evelyn raised her knee and drew her knee back, ramming it as hard as she could into Caleb's groin. He instantly let go of her, doubling over in pain and groaning loudly. She stepped away from him and glared at him. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed at him, her eyes shooting daggers at him. A scoff escaped her lips. "Know your place, Mr. Winthrop," she said with a hint of finality in her tone. She turned and ran out of the restroom, throwing the door open before he recovered and grabbed her back. She slammed the door behind her, backing away from it slowly. Suddenly someone grabbed her arm and pulled her away. She yelped and turned, her hand forming a fist ready to smash into the person's face. "Dr. Palmer." The voice made her pause. "Travis," she said, lowering her raised fist. "What are you? Is anything the problem?" Travis asked, his eyes looking around. "Yes, I'm fine. I was just going back to work now." Travis raised a brow. "Okay, let's go, shall we?" Evelyn nodded, eager to leave the restroom environment before Caleb came out. "So, Dr. Palmer," Travis spoke up. "Mr. Winthrop, who is he to you? Is he somehow related to you?" "No, exactly," Evelyn said hesitantly, not really wanting to talk about it. "Is he your husband? He seemed really offended seeing us together back there." Evelyn inhaled deeply. She turned to Travis and smiled. "Travis, I don't want to talk about him," she said. Travis nodded. "Ah, then I won't ask any more PMC, thank you," Evelyn said gratefully. As they headed back to the wards, she turned and glanced towards the restroom. Her body bristled with anger again. What exactly was Caleb trying to prove? Did he try to kiss her back then? Was he out of his mind? Evelyn remembered how she had spent so much of her time loving him when he never cared about her. All she had given up and abandoned to be a loving housewife for him, and how quick he was to throw it all away. Her hand curled into a fist. He was a joker if he thought she would let him worm his way into her life so easily. Caleb groaned deeply in pain, bent over the sink. He couldn't believe what had just happened in the past minute. Did he wasn't to kiss Evelyn. He raised his body up and stared at his reflection in the mirror. His face was squeezed in pain and agony. Evelyn had put a lot of strength into that kick. He wondered what could have made him act that way. Was he jealous? Of what exactly? She wasn't his girlfriend or anything. So why exactly did he act like that? He had convinced himself that he didn't love her, not for a single day. Yet if that was the case, why did he drag her to the restroom? Why did he try to kiss her? Why did he feel the violent urge to punch that doctor in his face? Caleb waited a few minutes for the pain to abate. Once it did, he straightened himself up and walked out of the restroom. As he walked through the halls, he pondered on what next to do. He didn't want to face Evelyn again, especially not after she had wounded his pride. He got outside the hospital and headed for the parking lot to his car. He drove home, his mind deep in thought. Caleb got home and took a cold shower. However hard he tried, he couldn't get the thought of Evelyn out of his mind. What was she doing now? Was she alone with that man? Was she in love with him? Were they getting together? Damn it. He hissed and slammed his fist into the bathroom wall. The cold water trickling down his back didn't help his nerves. "You don't love her, forget about her," he chanted to himself repeatedly. He finished up his shower and got ready for bed. Nothing he tried helped. He couldn't stop thinking about them. He got into bed and tried to fall asleep, thinking to himself that maybe in the morning everything will be better. PM Aurelia punched the password for the lock and the door clicked open. She walked into the penthouse, her arm heavy from the numerous shopping bags she carried. She tiptoed quietly, her eyes glancing at the wall clock that read. She knew she was very late, and Caleb didn't like it when she returned home late. She tried to make as little noise as possible as she walked up the stairs to their bedroom. She couldn't wait to show him all the stuff she had bought for him. He would probably scold her for spending too much money, but he never actually took it seriously. She opened the door slowly, squeezing her eyes shut when the door creaked. She expected to see him working, but to be surprised he was fast asleep. She dropped the bags carefully and tiptoed over to him. Her heart filled with love as she saw his sleeping form in bed. He seemed to be having a nightmare from how he was whispering and turning his head. Aurelia came closer, wondering what he could be dreaming about. "Evelyn," he whispered quietly. "Don't go, don't leave me," Aurelia gasped and stepped back. Hearing him call out his ex's name filled her with anger and hatred. Even after all these years, he still hasn't forgotten that woman. Aurelia felt a sadness prick her heart. She loved him with all her heart, and here he was dreaming of another woman. That damned Evelyn. Aurelia hissed under her breath. She'll pay for this. Very dearly. Chapter 23, Hypocrisy. Evelyn waved at her kids as she saw them off to school. They waved back, brilliant smiles on their faces. Evelyn was glad that they were doing all right. She checked her wrist watch. I'm almost late, she whispered under her breath and rushed to the bus stop. She waited for a bus, checking her watch every 3 seconds. 10 minutes later a bus rolled around. Evelyn got on, thinking to herself that she had to fix her car fast. The bus stopped in front of the hospital. Evelyn hastily got out, walking briskly to the front desk. Good morning, Dr. Palmer, the receptionist said with a pleasant smile. Thank you, Evelyn replied and hurried off. She headed to Malcolm's ward, deciding to check up on him first. One of the nurses sighted her and ran up to her. Dr. Palmer, the nurse said. You're here. Evelyn nodded. She extended her hand for the clipboard. The nurse handed it over. Evelyn looked at it, nodding to herself. This is very good. Evelyn said to herself. His stats were looking really good. This made her happy as his operation was in just a few days, and his health being perfect was her earnest prayer. He's responding very well to the treatments. At this rate, the surgery should go very smoothly. I trust you on that, Dr. Palmer. The nurse said. Thank you. Evelyn replied. She handed over the clipboard. I'll be going in now. Evelyn walked into his ward. On getting there, she was surprised to see Travis already there. A smile lit up her face but quickly died when she saw Caleb with him. The both of them were engaged in conversation, making Evelyn's heart race in anticipation of what they were talking about. Evelyn shook her head, deciding that it wasn't any of her business. Travis was a doctor too, and the second doctor in charge of Malcolm. He had every right to discuss with him about anything. Caleb noticed her standing there. He turned and started walking over to her, a devilish grin on his face. Hello, Evelyn, he said, deliberately refusing to address her as Dr. Palmer. We've been waiting for you a while now. Evelyn glanced at Travis, then moved her eyes to Caleb. What is this about? PM, I have come to a conclusion that my father's treatment will be moved to our estate. Caleb said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. And why would you do that? Evelyn asked, tilting her head to the side in confusion. For case, he said. This way you'll be coming to the estate for his treatment. My father isn't one to thrive very well on this. He looked around him, disgust on his face. Hospital environment. Evelyn didn't like how that sounded. None of it. She didn't like the shine in his eyes as he said it. She didn't like the condescending look in his eyes. You can't do that, Evelyn said sharply. He needs to be here for strict and thorough monitoring. You can't just up and decide to move him. I've already spoken to Trevor over here, Caleb said dismissively, pointing to Travis. He's not so fragile anymore, we can move his back home now. Don't you agree, Trevor? My name is Travis, Travis said. And yes, your father is reacting favorably to the treatment. Evelyn couldn't believe that Travis had sided with Caleb. She bit her lip in anger, now she couldn't push for Malcolm to remain in the hospital. I couldn't care less if your name was Travis or Table or whatever, Caleb said boredly, waving his hand. All that matters is that the decision has been made and that is final. You can't. The door opened wide and the director walked in. Evelyn heaved a sigh of relief, glad that he had come in and would support her. Director, Evelyn said as he approached them. This talk of sending Malcolm home, I don't understand how, Dr. Palmer. The decision has been made already, and yes, I agree with Mr. Winthrop, the director said simply, patting her shoulder diplomatically. Evelyn's jaw dropped. What? Yes, he said. I came in person to let you know. Don't worry yourself, everything will be finalized today, and you will receive a memo with detailed instructions. Evelyn couldn't believe what had just happened. She looked between the men, Caleb, Travis and the director. Was something going on that she wasn't aware of? Had they conspired against her? Very well, Evelyn said and straightened her back. I'll wait for the memo. Good, the director said curtly. My Winthrop, a word. Of course, Caleb said. He walked past Evelyn, giving her a dirty look. Evelyn stepped out of his way and let him walk by. PM, once the door shut, and it was just her and Travis in the room, she turned to him. Her really? She said. I can explain everything, Dr. Palmer, he said with a small smile of apology. Go ahead, Evelyn said darkly, eyes narrowed in annoyance. The workday came to a slow end. Evelyn had been busy with a lot of emergency surgeries to do. By the time she was done, it was almost 10 o'clock. She decided to check up on her car at the auto shop, and see if it was coming along nicely. Once she left the hospital and boarded a taxi for the auto shop. Upon her arrival she noticed they was starting to close up for work. She quickly raced up to the front door. "Excuse me," she said, a little out of breath. "I'm here to check up on my car. Your name and serial number please," the girl there said, popping her gum loudly. Evelyn gave her her name and her number. "Oh yeah," the sales girl said. "You can pick it up. It's been paid for already." Evelyn frowned. I didn't pay for it." "Yeah you didn't," the girl said with an eye roll. "Someone else did. So pick it and go." "Who could it be?" Evelyn wondered. "That would be me," a voice said behind her. Evelyn turned slowly to see who it was. Her eyes widened. "That would be me," a voice said behind Evelyn. Evelyn turned to see someone she hadn't expected. Her eyes narrowed. "You?" Aurelia stepped into the auto shop, a smile on her face. "Me?" she asked, pointing at herself. "Oh yes, me. I did it." Evelyn folded her arms, tilting her head to the side. She opened her mouth to speak, but Aurelia beat her to it. It's okay. Your thanks and appreciation can come later. I just noticed how you kept running to work and taking the bus and all that, and must I say, it doesn't suit you at all." Aurelia walked up to Evelyn, a wicked smile on her face. "And for the payment, don't worry about it. It's just a little gift from me. Are you taking the keys or not?" the salesgirl said, her tone exasperated. Evelyn turned to the girl and offered her a tight smile. "Just a minute, okay." The girl rolled her eyes. "Whatever. They don't pay me enough to care," she said and threw the keys to Evelyn. Evelyn caught them and put them in her pocket. She turned to Aurelia, her face stone cold. "Why are you trailing after me, following me around like a jobless woman? Don't you have something else to do with your time?" Aurelia laughed. "Following you around," she echoed. "Oh, of course not. I'm simply looking after my possession." "Your possession? I know your plans, you damn bitch. You're trying to seduce Caleb and take him from me. I know exactly how you plan to steal my man, and you won't succeed at all." Evelyn chuckled darkly. "Steal your man? Yes. I will never let such a thing happen again. He loves me very much and not you. Why can't you simply take a hint?" Aurelia said, raising her chin. "If your man truly loved you as you claim he does, you wouldn't be up in my face talking about how I'm trying to steal him. What do you know?" Aurelia scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Look at you, you poor sad thing," Evelyn said, pity in her eyes. "A man who is faithful to you will be faithful even if there are 100 women in front of him. Have you ever stopped to think that your man is trash? Trash." Aurelia exploded angrily. "How dare you? He loved me and all you did was trick him into that loveless marriage. And now you want to take him from me. I don't want your man." "The both of you are sad and disgusting," Evelyn said. "You were sleeping with a married man. Have you no shame? Yet you stand here and talk nonsense in my face. You are the shameless one." Aurelia shouted back at her. "You knew all those years that he didn't love you. And yet you still stuck to him like an unloved dog." Evelyn clicked her tongue in annoyance. "An unloved dog? Which one of us is not like a dog, huh? Lusting after my leftovers?" She laughed, shaking her head. "You have such a man now, huh? Why don't you go ahead and enjoy him?" Evelyn turned to her car. She took out her keys and unlocked the car. "How about your kids?" Aurelia said behind her. Evelyn felt her blood run cold. Her hand froze over the door handle she was about to pull open. Aurelia chuckled behind her and took a few steps forward. The clicking of her heels on the floor was drowned by the sound of Evelyn's heart racing. "2 of them, huh? Lovely kids, I must say. Sweet and polite and so beautiful. You must be really proud of them, huh?" Aurelia said directly behind Evelyn. Evelyn turned sharply. How do I know?" Aurelia scoffed. "That's not the problem here, is it? The question is, does he know?" Evelyn felt fear grip her heart. Did Aurelia know that the children belonged to Caleb? How did she know that? How did she even know about the kids? Evelyn raised her chin and hid her internal turmoil. "Does he know what?" she spat in anger. "That you're a whore," Aurelia said with a coy smile. "Does he know that you have children for another man? You speak to me about shame, but here you are jumping from man to man." Evelyn felt a pain in her heart. While Aurelia was wrong, her words hit a part of Evelyn that just hurt. "Stop it." "Oh, but I'm not done yet," Aurelia snapped. "Where is the ring on your finger?" "None. And yet you have kids for some worthless nobody, I'm sure. Does Caleb know about this? If he knew, do you think he'd even glance at you again? Or let you treat his father? That's enough. Whose man did you steal this time? Ha! I wonder. Does his wife know you have kids for him? Do the kids even know you seduced their father and birthed them? Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. She remembered how she had lied to her kids that their father was in town. What if they got more curious? What if Aurelia took this a bit too far? Aurelia smiled triumphantly as she saw the emotions change on Evelyn's face. "Ah, I knew it," she said with a laugh. "You're just as shameless, huh?" Evelyn dug into her bag for her wallet. She took out a few $100 bills and threw them at Aurelia. "That's money for the payment," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't need your kindness. I can pay for my car myself." "Oh really?" Aurelia laughed mockingly. "Can you also impregnate yourself?" "Huh?" Evelyn ignored her and got into her car. She started the engine and revved it as loud as she could. Aurelia rained abuses on her. Evelyn barely heard a word she said. Tears filled her eyes, tears she stubbornly bit back. She had never expected that Aurelia's words could ever hurt her, but today her words cut so deep. Evelyn didn't know what to do next. Her fear was that Aurelia would tell Caleb about her kids. And if she did, then Evelyn wasn't sure her kids would be hers any longer. Chapter 25, Unveiling. Evelyn drove home, struggling to contain her tears. Her mind raced by the second. Questions filled her head. So many she has no answer to. How did she find out about the kids? How was she able to trail her for so long and she had no idea about it? Would she tell Caleb? She can't do that, Evelyn whispered to herself. She laughed bitterly and wiped her eyes. Caleb didn't want a child. Not at all. In fact, that was why he had insisted throughout their marriage on her taking pregnancy prevention pills. He didn't want kids, not as much as Evelyn did. But there was the nagging thought at the back of her head. What if he did in fact try to investigate about the kids? It sounded like something Caleb would do. And if he did find out they were his? Evelyn bit her thumb, her nerves getting the best out of her. "There's nothing he can do," she said out loud. "He doesn't even know they're his. As far as he's concerned, I took the damn pills." She ran her hand through her hair. "Damn, I'm going crazy." Even if he did eventually find out, Evelyn wouldn't let him harm her kids in any way. She was their mother, she would protect her children with her last breath. She straightened her back and wiped the last of her tears. It pained her that she had let Aurelia of all people see her vulnerable and shocked. That's not going to happen again, she vowed within her. She steadied her hands on the steering wheel, inhaling deeply and trying to calm herself down. She was Evelyn Palmer. She had to remind herself that she wasn't the weak starry-eyed girl madly in love with a man who didn't care for her for a single moment in their 5-year marriage. She would show him just how much she had evolved. And Aurelia too. Evelyn smiled to herself, feeling her mood begin to get better. She realized she was hungry and stopped by a restaurant for some food. "What? You're bringing that woman to this house?" Aurelia screamed, staring at Caleb with wide eyes. "Why would you do that? Will you allow me to explain?" Caleb said, rubbing his temples. Aurelia scoffed and rolled her eyes. "You have got to be kidding me, Caleb. You're going to allow that woman to come back into this house? After everything?" "It's for my father," Caleb exclaimed. "We need to move him back from the hospital because he's stronger now. And Evelyn is the doctor assigned to him. What else do you want me to do?" Aurelia struggled for what to say. "Well, you can what? Magically become a doctor and take care of my father myself." "No, you can hire another doctor." Aurelia shot back. "Why are you making this such a big deal? Don't bring that woman back to this house. Not for any reason." "You're not listening to me," Caleb shouted. He grabbed her shoulders and glared at her. "This is a decision that will improve my father's health. Why don't you get it?" Aurelia knocked his hands off of her. "Don't touch me," she spat darkly. "All of this is a plot, huh? You just want to get back together with Evelyn. That's why you're doing this. And you're using your father as an excuse for it. You're delusional." Caleb sighed and turned away, heading to the kitchen. Aurelia raced after him. He walked to the fridge and took out a bottle of water. "Delusional?" Aurelia asked in a scoff. "I'm trying to make sure a strange woman doesn't steal what's mine and you call me delusional." "Steal?" Caleb sighed. He was about to drink the water. Put it down. "What are you talking about? Now you're insecure as well as delusional." Aurelia laughed bitterly. She couldn't believe the things coming out of his mouth. Calling her insecure and delusional. Her eyes narrowed darkly. All she was trying to do was protect him, and he was calling her insecure. She smiled to herself, remembering one of her cards up her sleeves. "You're still in love with Evelyn, aren't you?" He drank some of the water. "No, I was never in love with her, and you know that." "Is that so?" "Yes. All this is for my father's health. Once he is better, it's over. Everyone goes back to their old lives." Aurelia nodded slowly, smiling to herself. "That's okay, that's actually a huge relief." She turned and started walking away. "What are you talking about?" Caleb asked, suspecting an undertone in her voice. She turned to him and shrugged. But she had a dark smile on her face. Oh, it's nothing, she said with a dismissive wave. Just that I am happy your eyes have cleared now. Aurelia, Caleb said sternly. Spit it out. She raised a brow at him. Okay, since you asked so nicely, she said with an eye roll. Hey, your hopes for Evelyn dashed. Because she has moved on with her life now. What do you mean? All I'm saying is, she has a kid now. Caleb paused, his eyes widening. What? He whispered. Yeah, twins even. A boy and a girl. She has moved on with her life completely while you continue to remain here and daydream about her. Even in your damn dreams you call out her name, begging her to stay with you. That's enough out of you, Caleb said sternly, his eyes flashing in anger. Watch your mouth. Oh yes, I will, Aurelia said sarcastically. Move on with your own life too, and stop chasing after her. She waved at him and left the kitchen, slamming the door behind her. Caleb ran his fingers through his hair. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Evelyn had kids. He hadn't remembered seeing a ring on her finger throughout the hospital. Or was there a ring and he was just too blind to notice it? More importantly, how did Aurelia know? Chapter 26, Redirected anger. Evelyn inhaled and exhaled slowly. The penthouse looked the same as always, like a house straight out of a movie. Backdropped against the morning sun, it looked ethereal. Evelyn made her way over to the front door and hit the doorbell. The door opened to reveal Megan, the head housekeeper. Ma'am? Megan exclaimed, her eyes wide and a smile on her face. Oh my goodness. It's you, she said, happiness in her voice. Hello Megan, Evelyn said with a smile of her own. It's been a while, hasn't it? Please come in, Megan said and moved out of the way. She pushed her head into the house and yelled out, everyone. Evelyn is here. Evelyn walked into the foyer, her eyes instantly noticing that some changes had happened. The housekeepers greeted her warmly, excited to see her again. I had no idea you were coming back, Megan exclaimed. We were ordered by Mr. Winthrop to make the house as presentable as possible. With the amount of orders he dished out, one would think a goddess was visiting. Evelyn laughed shyly. Oh please, nothing of the sort. His father's treatment was moved back to the house. We recently got news about it. That's right, Evelyn said. I'm his doctor. Megan's eyes filled with tears. I'm so happy to hear that, ma'am. You're a doctor. That's wonderful. What are you all doing standing around? Caleb's voice thundered through the foyer. Megan gasped. She turned around to see Caleb descending the stairs. One look at his face with his furrowed brows and clenched jaw told her that he was in a foul mood. Mr. Winthrop, you're back so early, Megan said. The other housekeeper scurried away, not wanting to incur his wrath. Evelyn folded her arms across her chest, a deadpan expression on her face. Don't you think it's too early for all this? She questioned. It's barely even 7. Before seconds the foyer emptied out till it was Evelyn and Caleb alone. You, Caleb said darkly and stormed up to Evelyn. Have a lot of explaining to do, PM, please, Evelyn said sarcastically. Fire away. You have kids. He exploded, not even spending a single moment. Evelyn rolled her eyes. She knew just who had caused this, none other than Aurelia. Her suspicions turned out to be spot on. Evelyn shrugged. Yes, I have kids. They're at school right now. And so, she said coolly, observing him through her lashes. You had kids. Really, Evelyn? Caleb said. Yes, Evelyn replied. Now can we go and take care of? She didn't get to finish. Caleb grabbed her by the shoulders and slammed her into the closest wall. Whose kids are they? He hissed, his voice full of anger. Evelyn felt her heart skip a beat. His face was contorted in anger, his jaw clenched tightly. She feared he might shatter his teeth. So much of emotion from someone who didn't give a damn about her. Why does it matter to you? She shot back at him. You mean nothing to me now. We're divorced and both gone out separate ways. What I do is none of your business. And my kids are most definitely none of your business. Whose kids are they, damn it? Caleb raised his voice, his fingertips digging into her skin. Answer me. Why would I do that? Because I deserve to know. Is that clear? Now, I'll ask you one last time. Whose kids are they? Evelyn glared hotly at him. She couldn't believe the show he was putting on. Why did he care? What did it mean to him? All throughout their marriage he hasn't wanted anything to do with kids. Why was the news of her having kids so upsetting to him? They're not yours. Evelyn spat in anger. You can burn in hell for all I care. Caleb released her. He turned sharply and she could see his body vibrating with anger. He paced the floors, his hands curled into tight fists. Evelyn rolled her eyes. What an unnecessary display. How old are they? Caleb suddenly asked, turning to Evelyn sharply. Evelyn felt her heart skip. Damn it. He had become suspicious. And Caleb being suspicious wasn't a good thing because he did everything in his power to uncover the truth. Why? Evelyn asked, hoping to stall for time. I should get to my duties and stop this talk PM. Evelyn, he said, controlling his anger. I am so not in the mood for your sarcasm right now. Answer the damn question. I don't have time for this, Evelyn said and turned to leave. Get back here. He shouted at her, his voice striking a chord in her heart. Answer me when I talk to you. 11. Evelyn turned and looked at him. She contemplated telling him the truth or a lie. Therefore, she said simply, opting to go with the truth. 4. Caleb said, running the math on his head. How long has it been since we got divorced? Evelyn shrugged nonchalantly. I don't know, she said. Caleb paced this floor, his mind reeling. It had been 4 years since he signed those papers. Her kids were 4, she had been on the pill throughout their marriage. He had personally made sure of it. That means, the only viable answer was that she had cheated on him. He looked at Evelyn and he felt his world shatter. He couldn't believe she could do something like that. How could you? He asked her. She stared at him, no atom of remorse on her face. Please show me to Malcolm's room. I need to take his vitals for today to ensure he is in perfect health. Evelyn turned and headed up the stairs. I'll find him myself, she said with a dismissive wave. After all, I lived in this house for 5 years. I'm not done talking to you. Well, I'm done listening to you, Mr. Winthrop, she said with a note of finality in her voice. Caleb was left in the foyer alone, a pain he couldn't name consuming his heart. Chapter 27, A Necessary Evil. Did you cheat on me? Evelyn froze. She heard Caleb's footsteps get up closer behind her. He walked past her and stopped in front of her. She stared at him, the emotions playing out in his blue eyes. Pain, anger, hurt. Evelyn replayed his question in her head. She found it laughable. He was her first everything. And even after their marriage, she hadn't been with any other man. He was her everything. And yet he stands in front of her and questions if she cheated on him. But Evelyn knew that the kids were his. There was no denying. That night of passion she hadn't taken the pills. If she lets him know the kids are his, he will immediately stake claim to them. And she didn't want that to ever happen. No one will take her children away from her. Not even their father. What's taking you so damn long to answer? Caleb asked, tilting his head to the side. His eyes roamed her face, searching for what she wasn't aware of. Evelyn made her decision there and then. She raised her chin and smiled coyly. What? Shocked. Caleb's eyes widened. What? He whispered, disbelief on his face. He waited, he really waited for Evelyn to laugh it off and say it was a joke. But she didn't. The haughty look on her face didn't change on bit. Caleb felt his world shatter. Was this Evelyn? Was this why you wanted a divorce? He asked, expecting her to say no. Expecting her to say anything else. She shrugged without a care in the world. You want me to lie? It suddenly dawned on Caleb that he knew nothing about Evelyn. Everything he thought he knew was crumbling to dust before his face. He stared at her. He couldn't believe she did something like that while looking so innocent all the damn time. You were screwing someone else while we were married. He couldn't take it anymore and asked. She laughed, her voice soft yet mocking. PMC, you didn't think you were the only one I was fucking, did you? Her words felt like a sword straight to his heart. Get out of my house. Why? For dealing you with the same hand I was dealt with. She shot back at him. Did you ever for once throughout 5 years of marriage love me? No. Not even for a single moment. I forced you into marriage, that's what you said, huh? Caleb narrowed his eyes. He didn't want her to see the internal turmoil he was having. She was right. He never loved her, but he hadn't stopped to think for once that maybe she would seek that love outside. You were fucking Aurelia, weren't you? While we were married, even till now. And you stand there playing Mr. Holy, judging me. Why didn't you say anything? Anything like what? Evelyn scoffed. Oh please, love me honey. Love me, for I'm so lonely. You had no right. Evelyn, you had no right to do what you did. Well, neither did you. Evelyn shouted back. She could feel her throat clogging up with tears. It dawned on her that she hadn't had this conversation with him in the past. She had no idea it would be this painful. Do you know how much it hurt? She asked, her voice a soft whisper. Knowing that you were thinking of another while you were with me. Knowing that you only saw me as a little sister. Do you know how much it hurt knowing that I can never have my husband all to myself? Caleb looked away, the sight of her teary eyes striking a chord in his heart. He didn't know her feelings were this strong. Do you have any idea? Knowing that I could never make you happy the way she did. You were once all I ever wanted. Caleb sighed and rubbed his temples. Evelyn, please, that's enough. It's enough when I say it is. You're shocked I have kids. I'm shocked you have the audacity to think you still have me wrapped around your finger like the starry-eyed virgin I was. Caleb glared hotly at her. The mental image of another man touching her was driving him insane. The thought that another man would get to hear her soft moans, touch her skin, and he shook his head to clear his thoughts. Get out of my house. Now. Good luck with that, she scoffed. I'm here as a doctor. I think you were quick to forget that, Mr. Winthrop PM. Each time she called him Mr. Winthrop, he felt like punching a wall. Well, as of today you are fired, Caleb said darkly. I don't want you anywhere near me. The feeling is mutual, she said with an eye roll. Now, lead me to Malcolm's room. I'm way behind schedule as is. She turned and headed down the hallway. She opened a door and peeked her head inside. Caleb watched her, and he couldn't describe how he felt. He couldn't understand why he was so hurt, if he didn't love her. He raised a hand and gripped his chest, the pain settling there numbing. Why did it hurt so much? He had spent so long convincing himself he didn't care about her, he didn't care what she did or where she went. He had convinced himself that they were long over. Yet why was he still invested in her life? Why did he want to know everything she did? The one he loved was Aurelia, no one else. He had always loved her, long before Evelyn was his wife. So why? You do know I have other patients to attend to, right? Evelyn called from the hallway, her voice loud. Where is he? Evelyn, I told you to, ma'am, Megan called from the stairs. He would like to see you. Evelyn smiled brightly. She walked down the hall and brushed past Caleb. Thank you, Megan, as always so dependable. Megan nodded. Right this way, please. He heard your voice, I guess you two were really loud. Evelyn turned and looked at Caleb. Oh well, just a little misunderstanding, she said. She turned back to Megan. Let's go please. Chapter 28. Caleb watched Evelyn leave, and an unpleasant mix of emotions settled in his chest, the most prominent one being frustration. Evelyn had to be joking, right? There was actually no way she had children for another man while he was still married to her, he muttered to himself. Caleb ran his fingers through his hair, his frustration growing. Who was the man? Who was the one she was while married to him? He questioned angrily. Caleb felt betrayed and used. Was this why she walked up to him and asked for a divorce? Because she was pregnant for another man and she used Aurelia as a cover-up? You have to be kidding me, Caleb said to himself, laughing bitterly. He had never suspected that Evelyn was capable of cheating. He knew her to be demure and innocent. His mind raced as he tried to comprehend the possibilities. Who could the man be? He wondered aloud. As much as he tried, he couldn't ever recall seeing Evelyn with another man. He tried and tried, but all he came up with were blanks. Then suddenly, a thought came to his mind. Cole. He had seen Cole flirting with Evelyn. Could it be that she knew him long before now? He mused. He recalled her and Cole, dancing and laughing just a day after their divorce. Almost like she was finally happy to be with him. Caleb felt a spark of anger. He took his phone out and made a call. While waiting for the person to pick up, he made his way out of the house. Mr. Winthrop, the voice on the other line said. I have a job for you, Caleb said simply. I need you to find everything you can about a certain somebody. And by everything, I mean even the most embarrassing things he did in high school. I want to know his whereabouts, who he's been with, and if he does have any children. Yes, Mr. Winthrop. What's his name? Cole Jenkins, Caleb said. Call me when it's ready. PMC. Affirmative, sir. Caleb ended the call and put his phone back into his pocket. He'd decided that he'd had enough. Enough of playing nice guy. It was now time for him to turn cold and ruthless as he'd always been. Evelyn wouldn't know what hit her. Now please, if there is any complication at all, call my private line. This one here, Evelyn pointed at her card. Megan nodded. Yes, ma'am, I will do just that. You're leaving already? Malcolm asked, his eyes tired and sleepy. Evelyn smiled warmly at him and touched his hand. Yes, for today, my work here is done. Soon, you'll be back on your feet like nothing ever happened. He returned her smile. Thank you, Evelyn. Evelyn nodded slowly. I'll be taking my leave now. Won't you stay for lunch? Megan asked. I'll make your favorite. Evelyn shook her head sadly. I'm afraid not, maybe another time. Megan looked sad for a bit but then brightened up. All right, I'll see you to the door. It felt like it was days when in fact it had only been a few hours since Evelyn had her fight with Caleb. She was half expecting to see him in the house on her way out, but there was no sign of him anywhere. Megan walked her to her car and handed her a box. They're cookies, Megan said. I made them for you. Evelyn took the box, the fresh scent of chocolate chip cookies serenading her nose. She smiled. "Oh, thank you, Megan, I've missed your sweets." Megan beamed. "It's a little thank you for the work you do for Malcolm." Evelyn put the box carefully in her car. "I'll be leaving now. Please take care, okay?" "Yes, and you too, ma'am." Evelyn got into her car and drove off. She headed to Ashley's place, eager to confide in someone about the lie she had just told. Evelyn's apartment was in a quieter part of town. Evelyn got there, and luckily, Ashley was home. "What is this?" Ashley asked. She stood in the doorway, a cup of yogurt in her hands, and still in her pajamas. "Don't you have work?" Evelyn asked sarcastically. "Don't you have patience?" Ashley shot back. They glared at each other for 2 seconds, then burst out laughing. "Come in," Ashley said, stepping aside. Evelyn walked in. Her apartment was tastefully decorated in lilac and white. Soft classical music was playing from the speakers. Ashley jumped on her couch. "You want some yogurt?" she asked Evelyn, raising up a second cup. "Not exactly," Evelyn replied and joined her on the couch. "You want booze?" "No. It's afternoon." Ashley shrugged. "What's wrong then? Something must have happened." Evelyn sighed heavily. Ashley's cat, an orange tabby, jumped in her lap. She stroked the cat's soft fur as she recounted the experience to Ashley. Ashley's eyes were wide. "No way," she said. "I know, right?" Evelyn exclaimed. "Perhaps I should have just told him the truth or something, and yet I know," Ashley interrupted, raising her hand. "You had kids for Caleb?" "Yes. That's what's surprising you." "Heck yeah," Ashley shouted. "This is Caleb Winthrop we're talking about. He's powerful. He's connected. He didn't want the damn kids." "I know that, but don't curse using my children," Evelyn exclaimed. "But I just can't hand them over to him. They're my kids." Ashley shook her head sadly. The cat jumped off Evelyn's lap and went off somewhere. You do know if he does find out, he's winning custody." Evelyn's heart skipped. "What? And he'll probably sue you too, and take your kids. Then you'll be ruined. Your career gone." "I know, if you really do," Ashley said and ate some of her yogurt for cinematic pause. "You'll do everything in your power to make sure he never finds out they are his. And also, the guy never loved you, he never gave. You need to make him realize the gem he missed. Don't waste your time on him. Who says you need men to raise a kid?" Evelyn pondered on her words. "True." Chapter 29, The Other Man 02 Dude, what the fuck? Cole shouted at Caleb. The last thing he expected was for his rival to show up and knock him out in his own house. Caleb dropped the bucket of water he had dumped on Cole on the floor. "Start talking." The cold voice was enough to send the whole room reverberating. Cole glared at Caleb, not liking the man one bit. He had done his best to avoid Caleb, and it hurts him to know that the girl he had a secret crush on loved another, and the worst was how he sees the guy treats her as trash, when she was meant to be treated like a queen. He never loved her, yet he still got married to her. Cole could never forgive Celeb for what he did to Evelyn. "What the fuck do you want?" Cole spat in anger. "You think you can just barge into my house and assault me? I'll have you sued for break-in and harassment." Caleb laughed haughtily. "Sued? You should know that I am the court. The court will always favor me, no matter the case. Get the fuck out, man." Caleb punched Cole square in the face. Cole howled in pain, his nose starting to bleed. "What was that for?" Cole screamed. "Are you crazy?" Caleb sighed and wiped blood off his knuckles. "I have a simple question for you, and you'll do well to give me an answer." "What? You got Evelyn pregnant, didn't you?" Cole looked confused. "Evelyn?" He looked around, confused. "Mun, what I would do to have a single night with Evelyn. What's all this? I know nothing about her. You think I had something with her? Don't lie to me." "Oh, believe me. If I fucked Evelyn, I would rub it in your damned face, pretty boy." Caleb wanted to punch him again, but he sighed and realized it was a waste of time. Why did he even think Cole was responsible? What a waste of time. Caleb spat in annoyance and turned away, heading to the door. "Hey." Cole called out. "Man, untie me. Don't leave me here." Hey. Caleb ignored him. He wondered why he was so invested in finding out about the father of Evelyn's kids. He and Evelyn were already divorced, so why? He knew the answer. He wanted to find the idiot and give him a piece of his mind for daring to touch what belonged to him. But then they were divorced. Wasn't his actions all contradictory? He didn't love Evelyn, he kept telling himself. So why did he keep doing all these? Letting out a huge breath, he sighed as he raked his hands through his hair. Caleb got to his car and drove off. He headed straight to his favorite bar to get some drinks and clear his head. He parked in front of the bar and got out. It was an expensive bar, serving the elite of society. Caleb got in, as he was a regular. He headed straight to the drinks and ordered an aged whiskey. The alcohol burned his throat. He liked the feeling. How could she cheat on him? How could she? And she never came clean, just asked for a divorce and walked away like nothing ever happened. Caleb drank more of the whiskey, asking for more to be poured. He thought she couldn't ever hurt a fly, but he was proved wrong. He felt like a big fool. Caleb staggered into his house, his keeps in his hands, and a bottle of Jack Daniels he had gotten from the bar. He saw Aurelia sitting on the couch, waiting for him. She instantly got to her feet and rushed over to him. "What happened?" she asked. "Oh my goodness, you're so drunk." He pushed her away. "Stay away from me," he hissed in anger, in voice not slurred despite all the alcohol he drank. Aurelia took a step back, shock on her face. "How could she cheat on me?" he yelled, his voice echoing throughout the house. "How dare she? After all, after everything. She lied to my very face. For 5 years, 5 whole years she was seeing him." Aurelia didn't need to be told he was ranting about Evelyn. It filled her heart with anger. "Is this about Evelyn again?" she asked with an eye roll. "What do you know?" he snapped at her. "Do you know how it feels?" He stopped and was about to fall. Aurelia reached out and grabbed him. She ended up falling on top of him. "What are you doing?" he asked with narrowed eyes. Aurelia stared down at him. She slowly raised herself up and straddled him, rubbing her clothed cunt against his crotch. She smiled lustfully. "What does it look like I'm doing, Aurelia?" She slid her nightgown off her shoulders, revealing her full breast. She took his hand and put it to her breast. "I'm right here," she said softly, grinding on him. A soft moan slipped through her lips as she felt herself growing wet. "You don't have to ask." Caleb pushed her to the side, her body hitting the floors. She cried out in pain and sat up, glaring at him. "You're not her," Caleb hissed and got to his feet. "You could never be her. Don't even try it. I want nothing to do with you. She's in your past," Aurelia screamed out. "Why can't you forget her? Even in your drunken state you still choose her over me. You're not her," he shouted back at her. His eyes narrowed in anger. "Get the fuck out of my face." Tears filled Aurelia's eyes. She couldn't believe how he was always choosing Evelyn, even when he kept saying that Evelyn meant nothing to him. She got up and wiped her eyes in anger. She pulled her night dress over her shoulders. She heard the sound of Caleb grumbling to himself and going up the stairs. He kept talking about Evelyn, Evelyn. Aurelia slumped on the couch in anger. She was so done with the Evelyn drama. So damn done. Chapter 30, done with it. The light was too bright for his eyes. Caleb woke up and instantly felt the explosive headache threatening to tear his head apart. His head swirled and his vision was out of focus for a while before getting clearer. He slowly got up in bed and rubbed his head. What the hell had he been doing last night to get such a headache? His foot but something on the floor. He looked down to see a bottle of Jack Daniels. He sighed heavily. He recalled that the previous night he had gone to a bar to drink and somehow became wasted. Everything else was a blur that he couldn't recall. Why had he gone to a bar in the very first place? He got out of bed, wobbling on his feet a bit. He dragged himself to his bathroom and brushed his teeth. His reflection in the mirror was alarming. His hair was messy and his skin looked dull, plus the dark circles under his eyes. He washed his face and brushed his teeth again to get rid of the alcohol smell. After he was done, he made his way to Aurelia's said room. Perhaps she would have an idea of what had happened while he was drunk to stupor. He left his room and walked down the hall to Aurelia's room. He opened the door and walked in, surprised to see her packing up. Oh no, had he promised her a vacation while he was drunk? "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't reply and continued to fold her clothes and dump them into her suitcase. She was fully dressed, with her hair and makeup done. "Are you going on a vacation?" he asked again. She was silent for a moment, then she said no. Caleb sighed, not liking her lack of response. His head was still pounding and all he wanted to do was take aspirin and rest. "Then what are you doing? Are you finally going back to your own apartment?" "Why do you care?" she replied coldly. "After all, you never wanted me here, did you?" ORPM00. Caleb sighed and rubbed his temples. True, he had been opposed to the idea of her moving in with him, which was why he got her an apartment and all that. "I forced myself in here and I'm also talking myself out of here," Aurelia said. She brought out another suitcase and started piling her shoes inside it. "What exactly is wrong with you this morning?" "It's 1 o'clock, she snapped. "And what is wrong with me? You have no idea, don't you?" Caleb folded his arms and waited for her to continue. "I'm tried, okay? I'm really tired about all of this," she said. "All these years of being faithful and waiting for my love to love me back. It's exhausting. Do you have any idea how many men I had to turn down because of you? He stared at her, having no words for her. She scoffed and continued speaking. Eligible men, okay. I turned them all down for you cause I wanted nothing more than to be your wife. And as if that wasn't all enough, you keep choosing Evelyn. Evelyn all the time. Caleb realized it was a bad idea coming here. Also Evelyn. What did anything have to do with Evelyn? Even when you're drunk to hell you choose her. If you're so obsessed with her, why didn't you just marry her? Why did you have to waste so much of my time on fake promises? Caleb wasn't obsessed with Evelyn. Not by a long shot. He didn't love her. He didn't care for her. And Aurelia was failing to see that. Why won't you talk to me? She screamed. Say something. Anything. Caleb felt his head splitting in half. His headache was further worsened by her screaming. He grabbed his head, hissing in pain. The first thing he should have done was take some damned aspirin. He was so not in the mood to deal with Aurelia. Not for any reason. He ignored her completely, turned on his heel, and left. He heard her horrified gasp behind him, and rolled his eyes. If she wanted to leave, she could up and do so. He didn't care. He went back to his room, and took some aspirin from his medical cabinet. Aurelia sat on her bed, surrounded by her suitcases of clothes. She couldn't believe Caleb at times. He had just ignored her like she wasn't even there, even though he was the one that came to her. Aurelia was tired. She had always suspected that Caleb still wanted Evelyn back in his life, but every time he would deny it, making her look like a fool. She felt betrayed and stabbed. All she wanted was his attention, and he wasn't even giving it to her. It wasn't like this in the past. In the past he was all hers, and she knew it. She reveled in it. Now it was obvious that he didn't feel that way about again. Ever since Evelyn had returned, things had changed for the worst. The little attention she had gotten from him was gone. He seemed consumed with thoughts of Evelyn. And last night, Aurelia's heart broke. If given the chance, she was very sure he would get back with Evelyn. She felt stupid that she had wasted so many years of her life on him, hoping that he would love her with all his heart. When Evelyn was divorced, she had been so happy. Finally, he would be all hers. How wrong she was. Aurelia wiped her eyes and made a resolve in her heart. She was tired of all these pointless waiting around. Tired of the Evelyn drama. Tired of being pushed aside all the time. It was time for her to make a change and show them just who she was. And why no one messed around with her.